Hi guys. Tonight we drift into the Egyptian dusk, the kind that turns gold to violet and heat to hush. You're standing on the edge of the desert, toes in cooling sand, watching the sun melt into the Nile's mirror. The day's glare is gone, the air thinning into a chill you didn't expect. You probably wouldn't survive this night without a good plan. No campfire, no electric blanket, no buzzing heater tucked under linen sheets. Just you, the stars, and the vast breathing silence of the desert. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. The desert begins to cool. You can almost hear the temperature drop a soft sigh over the dunes. The day's stored heat releases upward, and the dry air swallows it greedily. You draw your shawl tighter, just as someone in ancient Egypt might have, 4,000 years ago. You imagine walking through a small village near Thebes. Mudbrick houses glow faintly orange as their walls hold on to the day's warmth. Inside one, a woman gathers reeds and papyrus scraps, not for fire, but for weaving into mats. The family dog curls into a hollow corner. The children play until the cold nips at their bare shoulders. And then, together, they prepare for night. The Egyptians, for all their grandeur, pyramids, temples, gods that shaped the cosmos, were masters of simple survival. They didn't just build monuments, they engineered comfort from nothing. When the sun fell, they faced a paradox. A land so hot by day it could boil the breath from your lungs, yet so cold by night it could numb your fingers before dawn. And still, they found warmth without flame. The first trick? Earth itself. The Nile Valley was their furnace by day and their blanket by night. Thick mud brick, made of clay and straw, absorbed heat like a sponge. As you brush your hand along such a wall, you'd feel the faint exhale of stored sunlight, even hours after sunset. It's the same principle used in modern eco-homes' passive thermal design, but here, it's achieved with bare hands and river muck. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians understood this scientifically or intuitively. Some believe it was conscious architecture. Others think it was accident turned wisdom. Either way, their homes were natural batteries of warmth. Step inside one, and you'd notice how quiet it feels, how the walls hum with yesterday's heat, holding back the night's teeth. You picture yourself lying on a reed mat, smelling the faint sweetness of papyrus and river silt. The ceiling, woven from palm fronds, creaks slightly with the shifting cool. There's no fire to light, the room smoke would stain the walls, and oxygen was too precious to waste, but a single oil lamp flickers near a carved niche, its flame tiny, controlled, symbolic. The Egyptians revered fire as a divine force, too sacred for casual use indoors. You roll onto your side, imagining the scratchy weave of linen against your skin. It's surprisingly soft cool in summer, insulating in winter. The night air smells faintly of date wine and grain, of sweat and clean clay. The village dogs bark once, twice, and the desert answers with silence. Did they shiver, these people of sun and stone? Possibly. But they also knew how to layer. Linen sheets, woolen wraps, palm fiber mats, each added texture and air pockets that trapped warmth. Some nights they'd sleep close, whole families beneath a shared textile, breath clouding in the dim light. The stars above Egypt were cruelly clear. Without moisture, without smoke, they seemed sharper, almost close enough to cut. You lie beneath that same canopy, listening to the soft hiss of the desert wind slipping through cracks in the wall. The mud smells faintly damp, holding the ghost of the Nile. Somewhere, a frog croaks from an irrigation ditch, the last echo of day. One mainstream fact often surprises people. Winter nights in Egypt, especially in Upper Egypt, can plunge near freezing. Tourists today still pack sweaters, though they spend their days sweating through temples. Ancient Egyptians adapted to that swing intuitively. A quirkier tidbit? Archaeologists found that some wealthier Egyptians kept warm using stone headrests, cooling by design but paradoxically protective. By elevating the skull, they avoided contact with the cold floor and maintained airflow around their body heat. Not exactly cozy by modern standards, but effective for health and posture. You can almost feel your neck protesting and then relaxing into the logic of it. As for the eternal debate, historians still wonder how much nightlife revolved around warmth versus ritual. Were evening gatherings primarily social, telling stories, preparing offerings, or simply practical ways to share heat? The lines blur, as they always do in ancient history. Outside, the desert lies silver under moonlight. Jackals move like shadows, their cries echoing down dry riverbeds. The village sleeps in layers, walls of earth, layers of mat, folds of cloth, then skin and breath and dream. You feel yourself sinking into that rhythm, heartbeat slowing, mind softening at the edges. The Nile gurgles faintly in the distance, a slow heartbeat of civilization. Every drop carries warmth from the sunlit day, cooling now under the starlight. Somewhere upriver, priests at Karnak whisper prayers to Amun-Ra, thanking him for light, begging his return. Even gods rest in cycles. The desert silence grows thick enough to touch. It presses around you, not menacing but absolute. You understand why the Egyptians loved duality, hot and cold, life and death, day and night. Each relied on the other to exist. Without the cold, warmth had no meaning. Without darkness, their sacred sun could not be reborn. You pull your imagined linen tighter and breathe in the dust of ages. The walls, the floor, even the faint heartbeat of insects beneath the plaster, everything hums with quiet persistence. These were people who survived by reading nature's small gestures. They didn't fight the environment, they listened. The air outside freezes a little more, frost kissing the dunes. But within these walls, the mud and thatch and human warmth hold steady. You close your eyes. You can almost hear the whisper of an ancient lullaby, one that speaks of lotus flowers and the rising dawn. And as your breathing slows, the story continues beyond this night, deeper into the rooms where Egyptians learned to turn a cold desert into comfort, one layer of earth at a time. You step farther into that small mud-brick home, the night air trailing behind you like a polite guest. The smell of baked earth lingers, warm at first, then faintly mineral as the cool settles in. The walls around you rise from the same ground your feet touch, made by hands that molded clay mixed with straw and river silt. Each brick holds a memory of sunlight. When you press your palm against one, the surface feels alive, like skin holding the last pulse of the day. Mudbrick is more than building material. It is climate control, insulation, and protection rolled into one humble block. During the blinding day, the walls drink in heat, then release it slowly through the long hours of darkness. This cycle repeats with almost divine rhythm, a living technology without tools. You can almost hear it, the faint tick of temperature shifting behind the plaster. The rooms are small, just enough for breathing and sleeping. Egyptians did not waste effort on grand interiors unless they were royal or religious. Their homes were practical, designed to survive both flood and frost. The roofs are low to keep warmth close. The floors are hard-packed earth, sometimes covered with mats, sometimes with nothing at all. The walls are thick enough that when you whisper, the sound barely escapes. You could almost believe the world outside has paused. A pot of grain sits by the doorway, its lid of woven reeds keeping out dust and mice. The family's oil lamp flickers in the corner, its light dim but steady. That single flame paints slow-moving shadows across the clay. You realize how little light they needed to feel safe. Brightness was for temples and gods. Night belonged to patience. The main room is divided by habit, not walls. A corner for food, another for weaving, another for sleep. If you look closely, you might spot small niches pressed into the mud, holding amulets or figures of Bez, the household protector. His wide grin and squat form are meant to keep away evil spirits. Some scholars still debate whether families genuinely feared these spirits or simply used such icons as decoration. Either way, you feel a certain comfort in his comical, watchful face. The temperature dips further, and the mudbrick proves its worth. It releases the warmth it captured all day, spreading it evenly like invisible breath. The Egyptians may not have had thermometers, but they understood this principle through generations of experience. They built thick for heat and shade for survival. In this way, every house became a miniature desert, harsh and hot by noon, kind and soft by night. You lie down beside the wall, the surface cool against your back but never biting cold. It is a curious balance, the way the heat lingers just enough. This same principle inspired later desert civilizations to copy Egyptian techniques. Romans borrowed it for their villas, and architects today still praise its perfection. A mainstream fact for you: entire villages of Egypt's Old Kingdom were built entirely from mud brick, not stone. Even when stone was plentiful, stone was for eternity. Mud was for living. Now here's a smaller, quirkier truth. The Egyptians often mixed chopped straw and even bits of broken pottery into their bricks. The straw added strength, while pottery shards acted like early insulation particles. Archaeologists have found fingerprints, children's smudges, even small paw prints from dogs or goats preserved in the brick faces. You can imagine the laughter as families built their own homes with the same casual teamwork that keeps warmth alive later at night. Historians still argue whether these homes had specific ventilation designs or whether airflow came purely by accident. Some say angled window slits and roof holes were carefully placed to manage desert wind. Others claim the builders simply learned from experience, patching and adapting as they went. Either way, the results were precise. Even now, standing here in your mind's quiet, the temperature feels tuned to comfort. You shift slightly and look toward the ceiling. It's made from palm trunks laid side by side, coated with packed clay. The smell of the dried wood mixes with dust and a hint of oil from the lamp. You imagine the faint rustle of the breeze above the roofline. There is no ceiling fan, no hum of machinery, only a whispering equilibrium between air and earth. In one corner, a small child curls beneath a linen wrap, her mother's shawl tucked beneath her chin. The father leans against the wall, eyes already closed, one hand resting on the dog at his feet. Even the animal seems to understand this rhythm of stillness. In the silence, you hear small sounds that feel eternal: the scratch of straw fibers, the gentle sigh of someone turning in sleep, the pulse of the river in the distance. You imagine being one of them, waking in the middle of the night and stepping outside for air. The sky above is enormous, overflowing with stars. The village glows faintly, each home exhaling invisible warmth into the cold desert. The sand crunches under your bare feet, colder now than metal. You lift your hand toward the horizon, where faint light marks the position of the moon. It's easy to see why Egyptians worshipped celestial cycles. The heavens were their clock, their calendar, their theater of mystery. Inside again, the air feels thick with security. The mud walls keep the desert outside, not just the temperature but the uncertainty. You touch the floor, feel its packed smoothness, and wonder how many lifetimes have done the same gesture before sleep. Perhaps a builder centuries ago did this every night, checking the earth that sustained him. When morning comes, these same walls will reverse their gift. They will protect from burning heat, creating cool shade instead of warmth. Every sunrise rewinds the process. No wonder Egyptians respected the concept of balance. Theirs was not a world of opposites, but of cooperation between elements: heat and cold, day and night, both parts of a shared heartbeat. You breathe in slowly, and with that breath, the room seems to hum a little louder. The mud, the straw, the flickering light, they form a living cocoon around you. There is no fire crackling, no harsh smoke, only the gentle murmur of stability. This is what safety meant to an ancient Egyptian: not flame, but earth; not abundance, but endurance. The lamp finally dims. its wick curling in silence. You close your eyes and feel the warmth stored inside these walls fade, but only a little. Enough to make you comfortable, enough to carry you into sleep. The night continues beyond your senses, patient, steady, unbothered by the centuries. The air inside the house settles as you lift your gaze to the roof. The ceiling is low and woven with life. Palm trunks stretch across the room, and above them lies a dense weave of palm fronds, reeds, and mud. You notice how every surface feels handmade, shaped by a rhythm of repetition, as if time itself had been folded into the fibers. The faint smell of dried reeds and clay dust fills the air, grounding you in a scent that is both ancient and comforting. You step closer to a wall where a small window slit lets in a thread of moonlight. It lands on the palm weave above you, highlighting the artistry of survival. The Egyptians understood their materials deeply. Palm fronds were more than waste from the date harvest. They were versatile, flexible, and perfect for roofing in a land where stone was too precious to waste on ceilings. A well-woven roof let in air but trapped warmth, kept out sand but allowed light to wander gently through. You tilt your head, feeling the night breeze touch your face through that little slit. The air is cold, but soft. The design of the roof lets it glide rather than rush, a quiet current that balances temperature. Modern architects might call it passive ventilation. Here it is simply wisdom passed through generations. The family sleeps below, their breathing even. The mother's arm lies across the child's chest, her fingers twitching slightly in dream. The dog snuffles near the doorway. You look up again, noticing how the light of the oil lamp flickers against the palm fibers, casting tiny golden ripples that dance like fish in shallow water. The beauty of it surprises you. It is so simple, yet so precise. The palm frond ceiling has a story of its own. During the day, it absorbs sunlight but never burns. At night, it becomes a silent insulator, holding back the cold while letting stale air escape. The combination of clay and reed creates a natural balance between permeability and shelter. If you pressed your ear to it, you might hear faint rustles of wind threading through the fibers, like a whispering lullaby from the desert. One mainstream fact about Egyptian homes is that roofs were often used as living spaces during the hottest months. Families slept on top of them when the air inside grew too heavy. Tonight, though, it is far too cold for that. You can imagine them climbing up with mats during summer, watching the stars as they drifted into dreams, their world framed by the Milky Way. A quirky detail found in archaeological notes mentions that palm roofs sometimes hosted small animals. Lizards or snakes slithered among the reeds, unseen but part of the household ecosystem. The Egyptians were not overly alarmed by this. They considered such creatures protective, even divine in some cases. A harmless serpent above the roof was sometimes seen as a good omen, a quiet guardian that kept pests away. You glance upward now, half expecting to catch a glimmer of movement among the reeds. Historians still discuss whether these roofing methods were influenced by neighboring cultures like the Nubians or whether they emerged purely from local adaptation. Some believe trade along the Nile carried ideas as well as goods, spreading architectural techniques both north and south. Others argue that Egypt's distinct climate forced its own unique style, one that required no foreign spark. The truth, as always, probably rests somewhere in between. You reach out and touch one of the wooden beams. The texture is rough beneath your fingers, fibrous and cracked with age. If this were daytime, the surface would be hot enough to sting. But at night, it is merely cool, like the calm of stone after sunset. You realize that each element of the house works in concert, every piece of natural material lending its own rhythm to the temperature. The room smells faintly of oil and reed dust. When the wind picks up, the roof groans softly, bending but never breaking. This flexibility is part of its secret. Instead of resisting nature, the Egyptians allowed their homes to move with it. The desert wind could howl, and the ceiling would simply sigh back. There is something deeply wise in that surrender. You close your eyes for a moment and picture the day's work that went into maintaining this roof. climbing ladders made of palm trunks, balancing bundles of reeds on narrow planks, patching the spots where the clay had cracked. Every repair was a gesture of continuity. The same materials, the same motions, the same faith that tomorrow night would bring the same cold, and that the house would hold it at bay. The oil lamp flickers again, briefly illuminating a corner where baskets of date seeds and tools rest. The palm ceiling above casts a dappled pattern across the wall, almost like sunlight through leaves. It feels alive, and for a moment, you could almost forget you are inside. You are under something grown, not built. You think of the river beyond, lined with date palms that feed and shelter this community. Their wood becomes roofs, their leaves become mats, their fruit becomes food. The cycle is perfect, every part of the palm useful. Even the husk finds life as rope or basket weave. It is a tree of sleep as much as a tree of life. You settle on your mat, feeling the uneven floor beneath you, hard yet familiar. The air inside the room grows denser, holding body warmth like a gentle fog. The palm ceiling overhead darkens as the lamp fades, the last shimmer of gold surrendering to blue shadow. You feel oddly safe beneath it, as if the woven reeds are arms folded protectively above. Outside, the desert cold presses against the mudbrick, trying to slip inside. But the house resists quietly, holding its own small pocket of warmth. The palm fronds above sway once in a soft gust, and you hear the faint patter of sand grains falling from them like rain. You imagine the sound lulling you to sleep, the rhythm of grain against clay like nature's own heartbeat. And as you begin to drift, the roof seems to hum faintly, alive with the memory of sunlight, breathing its warmth back into the dark. You lower yourself onto the mat, its texture both rough and forgiving. It is made from papyrus and woven reeds, the same materials that once carried ink and stories. The faint aroma of dried plants surrounds you, earthy and clean. When you shift your weight, the fibers creak softly, like footsteps on distant sand. The mat feels alive, part of the same landscape that built the pyramids and fed the river. Egyptians turned scarcity into comfort. Papyrus, abundant along the Nile, became more than a writing surface. Stripped, dried and braided, it transformed into sleeping mats, pillows, and even lightweight padding for furniture. Reeds from the marshlands added resilience, creating a surface that breathed. Unlike animal hides or thick cloth, these materials did not trap sweat or sand. They stayed cool, flexible, and perfectly suited for a land where day and night lived at war. If you listen closely, you might hear the echo of weaving looms. Women and craftsmen worked side by side, fingers moving with the rhythm of the river. Each strand crossed another, forming the texture that now supports your back. The sound of weaving would have been a kind of lullaby for the village, humming quietly into dusk. Archaeologists generally agree that woven mats were among the earliest Egyptian sleeping tools. Even before formal wooden beds appeared, they were practical, portable, and easy to repair. For poorer families, they replaced both bed and blanket, rolled up and carried from room to roof depending on the season. One small curiosity from archaeological sites near Amarna is that fragments of ancient mats still hold traces of perfume or oil. Imagine that. Someone long ago might have sprinkled scented resin over their sleeping mat to disguise the odor of river mud or sweat. The faint sweetness of myrrh or lotus would cling to the fibers for months, making bedtime a sensory ritual rather than just a pause in labor. Experts continue to puzzle over whether these mats served a symbolic role as well as a practical one. Some tomb paintings depict mats beneath offerings or sacred figures, suggesting they might represent grounding between heaven and earth. Others think the scenes simply reflect domestic life, showing what people used every day. No one can say for certain, and perhaps that mystery adds to their quiet power. The mat beneath you warms slowly with body heat. The reeds expand slightly as the fibers relax, forming a contour that cradles your body. The sensation is unfamiliar yet soothing. It reminds you that comfort does not always mean softness. Sometimes it means harmony, the body meeting the material halfway. Across the room, the family stirs. The father has finished patching a fishing net, his fingers slick with oil. He rolls his shoulders and stretches out on his own mat. The faint sound of linen rustles as he adjusts the wrap around his shoulders. Linen sheets, cool and fine, were a privilege even in modest homes. The Egyptians treasured them not for luxury, but for function. Linen breathed, adapted, and layered easily over reeds. It is widely accepted among Egyptologists that households layered mats and cloth seasonally. In winter, an extra papyrus sheet or wool blanket was added. In summer, families stripped back to a single mat, lying almost directly on the earth. This flexibility was their secret weapon against extremes. No fire needed, only understanding. A rather endearing discovery from a tomb in Giza includes a child-sized reed mat embroidered at the edges with colored thread. It serves no grand purpose, yet it tells a story of care. Someone, maybe a mother, wanted her child's sleep to look beautiful. Little details like this reveal the softness that ancient art rarely shows. The temperature outside continues to drop, but the small room feels stable. The mudbrick walls have released all their stored warmth now. The floor cools gradually. You can imagine the air outside turning to crystal, the kind of chill that makes sand crunch like frost. Inside, however, there is balance. Every surface holds just enough heat to keep the cold from biting. You adjust the edge of your mat and glance toward the open window slit. The stars beyond flicker through a thin curtain of reed fibers. Somewhere out there, the wind carries the smell of the Nile's damp banks. The blend of earth, water, and plant fills the night with life even as everything sleeps. If you could travel through time, you might see rows of similar homes across the river, each with someone lying quietly on a mat like yours. Generations of Egyptians shared this same sensation, this same comfort born of simplicity. There is something eternal in that repetition. You shift slightly again, listening to the soft rustle of fibers under your shoulder. The mat remembers its shape, pressed smooth by years of use. The surface may look fragile, but it endures through thousands of nights. That endurance feels like the truest luxury. It is tempting to imagine that, as you drift towards sleep, someone outside hums a tune, perhaps a lullaby, or a half-remembered hymn to Hathor, goddess of love and music. The sound mingles with the breeze slipping through the palm roof. Every breath of wind becomes part of the rhythm. The reed mat beneath you vibrates faintly with each current of air, as if keeping time with your heartbeat. The house grows darker, the oil lamp fading to a dull ember. In the dimness, you can almost feel the pulse of life beyond the walls. The desert, the river, the sleeping people, the whisper of mats breathing warmth into the night. All of it moves together, one slow heartbeat in the cool silence. You let yourself fall deeper into that rhythm. You feel the rough fibers soften under your skin, the faint smell of papyrus wrapping around you like memory. It is not luxury that carries you to sleep, but belonging. And somewhere in that stillness, the knowledge remains. They did not conquer the cold. They befriended it. The night deepens, and you draw closer to the faint glow of the oil lamp. The linen around you feels cool against your skin, whispering with every small movement. In a land where fabric could mean the difference between comfort and suffering, the Egyptians became masters of cloth. You run your fingers along the edge of your wrap and feel the texture shift between coarse and smooth, where hand-spun thread met careful weaving. Linen was the pride of Egypt. Spun from flax grown near the river, it shimmered faintly in lamplight, catching warmth without ever feeling heavy. The workers who wove it understood the desert as well as the priests who charted the stars. Each thread was a quiet rebellion against the extremes of nature. During the scorching day, linen breathed and cooled the body. At night, layered carefully, it trapped warmth close to the skin. The genius was not in invention, but in attention. Archaeologists often remark that Egyptian linen was among the finest in the ancient world. Even fragments pulled from tombs still show patterns so tight that modern machines struggle to replicate them. The fabric was light but strong, woven in layers of air. Imagine sleeping wrapped in something that felt like a whisper, yet held the heat of your body as faithfully as wool. It is widely known from temple records that linen carried both practical and spiritual value. It clothed workers and nobles alike, but it also dressed the gods. Statues of deities were wrapped each morning in freshly laundered cloth, an act of reverence that mirrored the daily rituals of the living. When you pull your wrap higher tonight, you mimic a gesture shared by priests and peasants alike. One delightful oddity found in burial chambers is the occasional inclusion of wool blankets beside linen garments. Wool was rarer in Egypt, often imported or shorn from a few native sheep. Its use was complicated by religious belief. Some priestly orders forbade wearing wool in temples because it came from animals rather than plants. Yet it was still valued for warmth in common households. Imagine a priest stepping outside sacred ground and immediately pulling on a wool shawl with guilty relief. There is still lively discussion among historians about how layering worked through the seasons. Did people combine wool and linen on the coldest nights, or keep them separate according to purity laws? Excavations in the Fayum region show evidence of both. Some households clearly mixed fibers, while others stored thicker wraps for winter only. The line between faith and comfort was not always clear, and perhaps that is part of what made Egyptian life so human. You adjust your position and feel the soft linen rustle. The sound is faint but steady, like the sigh of wind through papyrus. The wrap's scent carries traces of oil, maybe olive or castor, rubbed into the fabric to soften it. The result is a garment that does not just protect, but soothes. If you could look closely, you might see faint stains from use, the invisible fingerprints of countless nights. Most evidence points to the idea that linen was washed and bleached by laying it under the blazing sunday. The process gave it a brightness almost symbolic of purity. Workers at the river's edge beat cloth against smooth stones, the rhythmic slap echoing through villages. The same hands that washed temple offerings also washed household sheets. There was no clear divide between sacred and mundane. Everything touched by water and sun was, in some way, renewed. You can picture the morning after a cold night like this one. The sun rising over the Nile, steam lifting from wet linen stretched across reeds to dry. The white fabric glows against the deep blue of the river. Somewhere nearby, a woman checks her freshly spun thread, hoping it will fetch enough grain at market. Each strand carries a part of the rhythm of daily life. Each wrap a promise of comfort when the night returns. Among the stranger discoveries in museum collections is a fragment of linen that had been mended so many times it looks like a patchwork map. The owner must have cherished it, sewing and resewing until the threads themselves became history. To sleep in that wrap was to sleep in continuity, the comfort of something that had already survived many winters. You shift slightly and tuck the linen closer to your chin. The fabric traps the air your body has warmed. You can feel the faint humidity of your own breath collecting between layers, a living cocoon that softens the edge of the cold. It is not perfect insulation, but it is enough. The Egyptians rarely sought perfection. They sought balance. The child stirs again, pulling a thinner cloth over herself. The father moves without waking, his hand adjusting the corner of her cover. The motion is instinctive, older than language. Around them, the room glows faintly gold, the last drops of oil giving their light to the walls. It is tempting to think of these moments as unchanging, yet every generation added its own refinement. Some families embroidered the edges of their linen, others dyed them faint shades of yellow or blue using plant pigments. These were small acts of identity, quiet signatures in thread. When archaeologists uncover them now, they find traces of individual warmth, proof that style and care existed even in simplicity. Outside, the desert has grown silent. The cold presses against the house like invisible water. You feel it touch the edges of your imagination, but it cannot reach the warmth cocooned around you. The combination of linen and body heat becomes a soft defiance. The night may have claimed the dunes, but here in this quiet room, life still holds its own. You close your eyes and think of the generations who did the same. Every sleeper who trusted in woven flax instead of flame. Every family who understood that warmth could come from patience, from knowing how to work with nature rather than against it. The oil lamp finally goes out. Darkness folds itself around you like another layer of cloth. And in that silence you feel it, the calm intelligence of a people who mastered comfort without fire. The floor beneath you is cool but not cold, and as your body settles you notice the faint slope of the earth, smoothed by countless feet. Some homes in Egypt had simple platforms for sleeping, raised just enough to lift a person above the sand. You can picture one now, its frame of wood or woven palm resting low against the wall, with a mat and a thin linen sheet laid neatly across it. The air near the ground feels still, yet strangely gentle. The Egyptians understood that warmth could be trapped not only in walls and cloth, but also in height and space. Beds, in the sense we imagine them, existed long before the pharaohs, but Egypt gave them personality. The raised platforms served both practical and spiritual purposes. On the practical side, they protected against scorpions, beetles, and the small snakes that prowled the sand at night. Spiritually, being lifted from the ground mirrored the way gods rested on sacred platforms. Even in sleep, the body echoed cosmic order. You lie there now, imagining how a few inches of wood could make the difference between danger and rest. Archaeologists have uncovered wooden frames carved with animal legs, especially lions or bulls, symbols of strength and guardianship. Most were found in tombs belonging to the wealthy, but simpler versions existed everywhere. The average family might use stacked bricks or woven palm trunks to achieve the same elevation. You can almost see a carpenter at work, shaping a frame by lamplight, his tools simple but his motions certain. The grain of the acacia or tamarisk wood gleams in the glow, each cut deliberate. A rather interesting note from excavation records describes how some sleepers used sand itself as a kind of bed. They carved shallow depressions in the floor, lined them with soft dust, and covered them with mats. The sand, warmed during the day, released its heat slowly through the night. The result was something like a primitive heated mattress, created entirely by the rhythm of nature. The simplicity of it almost feels luxurious. Egyptologists still discuss whether these sleeping arrangements changed across the social classes or remained relatively uniform. Some evidence from workers' villages near pyramids suggests that even laborers enjoyed modest wooden frames or raised mats. Others argue that only households of status could afford the materials. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. What is clear is that every household, regardless of wealth, followed the same principle: distance from the cold earth, closeness to shared warmth. You shift slightly, pressing your palm against the floor. It feels alive, as if holding the faint echo of footsteps from generations past. The sand beneath the packed surface would have been raked smooth at day's end, a gesture of both cleanliness and comfort. Families might scatter a handful of crushed herbs or perfumed dust to mask the smell of damp clay. The fragrance of juniper or cedar lingers in your imagination, light but persistent. One record carved into a worker's ostracan mentions a man complaining that his platform had collapsed during the night, sending him into the sand. He blamed a mischievous household god for the prank. It is a small story, but it shows how humor softened hardship. The Egyptians lived with both reverence and playfulness, never far apart. If you look closer at the imagined platform before you will see that its surface is slightly curved, higher at the head. This shape supported a wooden or stone headrest, a curved arc that lifted the skull just above the mat. The design kept insects away from ears and mouths, but it also aligned the body with precision. Lying in that position, you might find it less comfortable than a pillow at first, but it straightens the spine, easing the breath. What began as a simple solution against pests became, in time, a symbol of refinement. According to temple inscriptions, beds of kings and priests were decorated with protective spells carved underneath the frame. Words of protection were written in ink or scratched by hand, calling on deities to guard sleep. You can imagine the comfort such faith provided. The idea that no harm could reach you as long as sacred words held up your dreams. The combination of craft and belief made every night a ritual. One small curiosity from domestic ruins is the presence of small stones arranged neatly under bed frames. Some researchers think they were used to steady uneven floors, but others suggest they had symbolic weight, anchoring the sleeper to the earth even as they rested above it. The interpretation remains open, a quiet puzzle for the modern mind. You stretch your legs and feel how the body adjusts to the floor's texture. The rhythm of the Nile, the pulse of the wind, the breath of clay, all of it merges here in this single moment of stillness. Warmth is not something forced, but something exchanged. Your skin returns what the walls have given. The platform holds your shape, remembering your weight. Even the air seems to balance itself around your breathing. It is easy to imagine waking to dawn in such a room. The roof above glowing pale gold, the air turning soft again, the floor cool but welcoming. Someone would rise first, perhaps the mother, and sprinkle a little water across the packed clay to keep down dust. The act of caring for the floor, for the bed, was part of caring for the self. As you sink deeper into the calm of this imagined home, you realize the Egyptians did not need fire to create warmth. They relied on rhythm, on repetition, on the conversation between sun and soil. The raised platform, the sand-lined hollow, the mat and linen layers, all are parts of a single system of quiet intelligence. The lamp flickers once, the last oil nearly spent. The shadows along the wall stretch into long ribbons. You draw your knees up slightly, the air beneath the bed still warm enough to comfort. In this silence, you feel the balance the ancients mastered, not conquering nature, but joining it. The air grows still inside the small mudbrick house. You can almost feel it waiting, the quiet before the first dream. The family begins to gather together on their mats, children pressed between parents, a grandmother shifting slowly to one side, her joints stiff from the day's labor. There is no separate room for anyone, only space shared, warmth shared, breath shared. The Egyptians knew that togetherness was the first form of insulation. Body heat became their invisible hearth. In the chill of the desert night, one person alone would feel the cold crawl under the linen, but two or three together created a pocket of comfort that no fire could rival. You might picture them now, a family lying close, shoulders touching, the scent of oil and grain hanging in the air. The faint sounds of breathing merge into something steady and rhythmic, the house itself seeming to exhale with them. Archaeologists have noted that family sleeping arrangements were often communal, especially in rural areas. Space was limited, and there was no sense of embarrassment in closeness. Children slept beside their parents well into adolescence, and elderly relatives shared mats with younger ones when the air turned sharp. This was not simply necessity, it was affection expressed through presence. Warmth was love made physical. A charming detail from Tumart shows women holding infants wrapped in cloth beside sleeping adults, suggesting that even babies were included in the family's night rhythm. The painted figures are peaceful, limbs intertwined like vines. You can imagine the soft hush of whispers before silence falls completely. Every household created its own pattern of sleep, woven from trust and familiarity. Egyptologists remain divided on whether wealthier families kept the same habit or preferred privacy. In noble villas, bedrooms sometimes included curtains or partitions, yet the evidence of shared sleeping chambers persists. Perhaps warmth ignored class. Even queens and priests might have chosen closeness over solitude when the desert winds turned cold. The walls hum faintly as they release the last of the day's heat. You can almost hear the pulse of it, a soft radiance spreading from one surface to another. Within that warmth, human bodies add their own energy. A sleeping group is a small ecosystem, constantly balancing temperature and breath. If one person stirs, the air moves, and another adjusts unconsciously. It is a living rhythm, as natural as the flow of the river. One lesser-known record written on a household ostracon mentions a mother scolding her son for sleeping too far from the group, warning that the night wind finds those who sleep alone. It is both advice and superstition, reflecting a truth about desert life. Cold air could snake through the smallest cracks and settle on uncovered skin. Togetherness meant safety from that invisible visitor. You imagine yourself lying among them, surrounded by soft rustles and the occasional sigh. The closeness feels intimate but not confined. There is comfort in hearing the breathing of others, in knowing that someone's warmth presses gently against your back. Even the animals join in this shared circle of life. The family cat curls near the mother's feet, and the small dog curls near the doorway, nose tucked under its tail. They too contribute their warmth to the room. It is easy to think of ancient Egyptians as distant or formal, frozen in their painted poses. But here in the dim glow of a fading lamp, they feel unmistakably human. The way a father turns on his side so the cold air hits his back instead of his child, or the way a grandmother adjusts the edge of a shawl without opening her eyes. These small gestures belong to every age. Archaeological evidence from village layouts suggests that houses were built close together, often sharing walls. This reduced exposure to wind and made each home part of a larger body of warmth. The result was a community that literally held heat in its structure. Warmth did not belong to individuals, it circulated among neighbors. A small curiosity from ancient medical papyri hints at another benefit of shared sleeping: protection from illness. The texts mention that a body cooled too quickly at night was more vulnerable to spirits of sickness. Sleeping close together was seen not only as physical protection, but as spiritual defense. The body was shielded by companionship as much as by cloth. If you listen now, the silence of the house begins to change. It is no longer empty but full of the faint music of life. Breathing, the creak of reed mats, the scratch of a mouse in the thatch. Outside, the wind sighs across the sand, searching for cracks it cannot find. Inside, the human warmth holds steady. You turn your head slightly and see the glow of the moon slipping through the window slit. It touches the faces of the sleepers, highlighting the curve of a cheek, the bend of a shoulder. Their expressions are calm, untroubled by fear of cold or darkness. For them, sleep is not an escape, but a continuation of the day's labor, a time when the body rests while the heart remains connected to the rhythm of the household. It is tempting to imagine the dreams that come in this shared silence. Perhaps the mother dreams of harvest fields turning gold, the father dreams of fish leaping from the Nile, and the child dreams of the same gods whose names echo on the temple walls. Each dream travels its own path, yet all are sheltered by the same warmth. When one person shifts, the rest instinctively move a little too, a ripple of contact that restores balance. No one speaks, yet the entire room adjusts in unison. It feels almost like breathing as one body. You let yourself feel it, that shared pulse, that wordless comfort. Outside, a jackal cries once, then the desert returns to silence. The sound does not disturb anyone. The family sleeps on, bound together by the oldest warmth in the world, the warmth of each other. You close your eyes, and in that stillness you understand what no written record can capture: the quiet perfection of human closeness in the cold of night. The air has cooled further, the faint sound of the river carried through the night. The family sleeps quietly, and beside them, another presence stirs. A soft thud, a sigh, the sound of small paws turning in a circle before settling. The animals are part of the warmth now. The Egyptians did not simply live with animals, they lived among them. Every creature had its purpose, and in the dark hours before dawn, those purposes intertwined. You open your eyes and catch the glint of a cat's fur in the lamplight. Its body curls against the edge of the father's mat, tail tucked neatly, eyes half closed but watchful. The Egyptians loved their cats not only for companionship, but for practicality. Cats kept snakes and rodents at bay, guardians of the grain and the home alike. They were welcome inside, especially on cold nights, their small bodies radiating heat that would otherwise be lost to the air. Archaeologists have found murals showing families with cats lounging at their feet, sometimes even eating from the same dish. It was not sentimentality, it was partnership. The cat earned its place beside the family by keeping danger away. And yet, it also became an emblem of comfort, a living presence of quiet grace. You can almost feel its purr now, steady as a heartbeat, blending with the sound of sleeping humans. It is well documented in ancient records that dogs shared similar affection. They were guards by day and loyal companions by night. A dog might lie near the doorway, body curled tight, serving as both sentinel and heater. One affectionate inscription found in a tomb refers to a pet as the one who stays by my feet when the cold breathes. The image is vivid and tender. You can almost hear the tone of pride in that long-ago owner's words. Among the more curious finds in excavated homes are small fenced corners filled with straw and scraps of cloth, believed to be sleeping places for domestic animals. Some even contained pottery bowls likely used for food or water. These little nests reveal how integrated animals were in Egyptian households. To invite them inside was not indulgence, it was survival. There is still ongoing discussion among researchers about how far this intimacy extended. Were livestock such as goats or donkeys ever brought inside during colder months, or was the practice limited to pets? Some argue that in smaller villages, young goats or calves were indeed sheltered indoors, especially during winter floods or desert winds. Others doubt this, pointing out that homes were too small and air too precious. The truth probably varied from one settlement to another. You imagine it now, the faint warmth of animals mixing with the steady temperature of human bodies, creating a microclimate within the home. The floor, once cool, now holds a low hum of life. Each breath, each small shift, adds another degree of warmth to the room. The Egyptians did not see this as untidy. They saw it as sensible, the house itself becoming a shared organism. A charming touch in certain burial offerings shows that affection for pets carried beyond life. Small statues of cats and dogs, crafted from limestone or faience, were placed beside owners in tombs. Some animals were even mummified with care, wrapped in linen and treated with the same reverence given to humans. The bond between species transcended life and death. You can imagine the comfort of knowing your companion's warmth would follow you into eternity. The dog at the door shifts in its sleep. The sound of its claws against the clay floor is small but sharp. Outside, a gust of wind passes, dust tapping against the wall. The animal does not stir again. It knows the rhythm of the night. When danger is near and when silence is only the desert's song, its steady presence feels like another form of fire, one that breathes rather than burns. According to ancient texts, certain gods were believed to protect households through the forms of animals. The goddess Bastet, patron of home and fertility, appeared as a lioness or cat. Her temples kept sacred cats, cared for by priests, symbols of both domestic peace and fierce protection. To sleep near a cat was, in a small way, to sleep under her gaze. The sense of safety was not superstition, but emotional truth. One endearing anecdote from papyrus fragments tells of a merchant who refused to leave his cat behind during a journey. He wrote that his cat kept my mat warm when the stars were cruel. The phrase lingers, simple, yet profound. You can picture that moment, a trader resting by the dunes, wrapped in a cloak, a small creature curled beside him, both keeping each other alive. Inside the Mudbrick home, the night holds steady. The mother's hand shifts to rest on the cat's back, her fingers curling into its fur. The warmth moves between them, seamless and instinctive. No words are spoken. The cold outside remains absolute, but within these walls, every living thing has become part of the same fragile flame. It is tempting to think that this quiet communion shaped the Egyptian sense of harmony. The gods, the people, the animals, the land they were, all pieces of one circle. Warmth was not something created, it was something shared. As you close your eyes again, you feel the faint vibration of a purr and the distant sigh of the wind. The desert beyond may be vast and unforgiving, but inside this humble home, warmth is alive. It breathes through every creature, a network of comfort woven from fur, flesh, and faith. The faintest shimmer of oil smoke lingers in the air, a reminder that even in darkness, the Egyptians had their rituals of comfort. The small lamp flickers on its shallow clay dish, casting soft circles of light along the wall. The flame is tiny, but its scent mingles with something richer. You notice the gentle aroma of perfumed oil, sweet and resinous, drifting across the room. Someone must have rubbed it onto their skin before lying down, a nightly gesture that was both practical and indulgent. Fragrance was part of Egyptian life in every sense. The dry air carried scent easily, and the people believed that pleasant smells invited good spirits while bad odors lured illness or misfortune. To sleep without scent was to sleep unguarded. You imagine the mother now, dipping her fingers into a small alabaster jar and smoothing oil onto her arms. The mixture glows faintly in the lamplight. It might contain myrrh, or lotus, or the crushed petals of blue water lilies. As she works the oil into her skin, the air fills with sweetness, softening the edge of the cold. Archaeologists generally agree that perfumed oils were used not only for beauty, but for preservation of warmth and skin health. In the desert climate, the body's moisture vanished quickly, especially after the sun's relentless heat. Oils sealed it in, forming a natural barrier against the night chill. It was a kind of invisible clothing, one that smelled of heaven. Among the more curious finds in tomb inventories are small scent cones, usually made from fat mixed with aromatic resin. They were placed atop wigs or hair during feasts and ceremonies. Some depictions suggest that these cones slowly melted in the heat, releasing perfume over hours. Scholars have wondered if smaller versions were ever used before sleep, not for celebration, but for quiet relaxation. Imagine lying in darkness while a tiny cone of lotus wax melts beside your head, perfuming the air as you drift into dreams. There is still lively discussion among Egyptologists about how widely such luxuries spread through the population. The wealthiest households could afford imported resins from Punt and Syria, but the poorer ones likely used simpler mixtures of animal fat and local herbs. Whatever the ingredient, the intention was the same: to transform the act of resting into something sacred. You lean closer to the imagined lamp. The flame dances just above the rim, reflecting in the oil. The surface ripples faintly, like a tiny sun mirrored in a pond. Each household kept at least one of these lamps, often shaped like a palm leaf or a flower. Light and fragrance worked together, one calming the mind, the other guarding the body. Sleep was not an interruption of life. It was part of its ritual. According to ancient writings on healing, some oils were thought to keep away nightmares. A blend of myrrh and cinnamon was recommended for peaceful sleep and strong breath. You can almost smell it now, spicy and warm, mixing with the faint smoke of the lamp. Whether or not it truly repelled bad dreams, it certainly made the night feel gentler. One small curiosity noted by researchers involves the use of honey in skin treatments before bed. Honey, mixed with oil or milk, was applied to soothe burns and dryness. Its sweet scent added to the nighttime air, drawing in comfort even for those too poor to afford rare perfume. The simple combination of natural sweetness and human warmth made the home itself a vessel of calm. You glance again toward the family. The mother's movements are slower now, her hand lingering near the oil jar before she closes it. The glow of her skin catches the last light from the lamp. Her hair smells faintly of lotus. The child beside her has already fallen asleep, one hand resting on the family cat. The room seems smaller, but not cramped, more like a womb of air and scent, pulsing softly. It is tempting to think that scent was also a bridge between worlds. In temples, priests burned incense to invite the gods. In homes, Families used oil to soothe the living. Both acts carried the same belief. Fragrance connects the earthly with the divine. The sweet smoke that rises from the lamp feels like a whisper between those realms. If the old stories are to be believed, the goddess Hathor blessed perfumed sleep. Her temples were filled with jars of scented fat, gifts from worshippers hoping for health and love. You can imagine a young woman praying at dawn, offering oil to Hathor and then using a few drops that night to anoint her own skin as if borrowing a spark of the goddess's beauty. The lamp sputters slightly, its wick shrinking in the oil. The flame wavers and steadies, reflecting off the polished jar nearby. The fragrance grows fainter but more intimate, sinking into the clay and cloth. Every object in the room now holds a memory of scent. Even the mudbrick walls seem to breathe it in. Outside, the desert wind carries no perfume, only dust. Inside, the opposite is true. The air feels rich, textured, golden. You breathe deeply, and for a moment it feels as if time itself smells faintly of myrrh and heat. The combination of light, scent, and warmth forms a perfect triangle of comfort. The lamp finally dies, the oil spent. The last breath of fragrance hovers, then fades. The darkness that follows is not empty, it is full of the warmth left behind by the ritual. You close your eyes, imagining the taste of the air, a blend of smoke, oil, and human breath. It is enough to lull even the most restless soul into sleep. The room is darker now, the lamp extinguished, but a faint glow from the moon filters through the slit window. The silver light touches the folds of linen, revealing soft shapes of bodies wrapped in rest. It is easy to forget that even sleep itself carried meaning in Egypt, that the way one dressed for night reflected not just comfort but identity. You glance down at your own linen shift, a simple garment of pale fabric that brushes against the knees. For the ordinary person, this was the most common form of nightwear. It served both as sleeping garment and daily attire, washed and redraped as needed. The fabric breathes against your skin, cool and clean. In the quiet, you begin to understand how this simplicity shaped the Egyptian sense of beauty. Nothing unnecessary, nothing wasted. Linen was a sign of purity, yet also practicality. It dried quickly after washing, absorbed oils well, and stayed fresh in the arid air. Workers, farmers, and even children wore variations of it. During the day, it protected against the sun. At night, it softened the sting of cold. For wealthier households, linen could be bleached almost white or woven into fine translucence that shimmered under light. To sleep in such fabric was to wrap oneself in status as much as softness. Archaeological evidence shows that while linen was the norm, some used wool or leather during the coldest months, especially in the delta where the air turned damp. Those garments were simple, thick rectangles or cloaks, heavy enough to trap warmth but never ornate. Warmth was the point, not fashion. Yet even the humblest shepherd might decorate an edge with dyed thread, a small reminder that care and dignity were never separate from survival. Among the small finds in workers' villages near Thebes are bundles of spare clothing kept under sleeping mats. Some were folded neatly, others simply piled, but many showed stains of oil or resin where they had been used as makeshift blankets. It is widely accepted among Egyptologists that fabric had multiple lives. A linen tunic that had served through the summer might become a sleeping wrap in winter, then later a rag for washing or bandaging. Nothing in the household was wasted. One delightful fragment of writing preserved on an ostracon describes a man grumbling that his wife stole my cloak for her dreams. The phrase suggests not anger but domestic familiarity, the same kind of teasing that might echo in any home today. You can almost see him, pretending to be cold while she laughs under the wool. There is ongoing discussion among researchers about the practice of sleeping naked or partially covered. Some temple texts imply that modesty was expected even in private, while other records and depictions suggest a relaxed attitude toward the body. In the heat of summer, it is likely that many Egyptians slept without garments at all, their mats and linens sufficient covering. The desert itself demanded practicality over propriety. The faint night breeze moves through the room, touching your arm where the linen ends. You pull the edge higher and notice how quickly the fabric adapts to warmth. The weave traps air without clinging, creating a cushion between skin and cold. There is intelligence in this simplicity, a quiet understanding of how to live with the elements instead of against them. It is known from burial inventories that even the dead were dressed for eternal sleep. Mummies were wrapped in linen bandages, layer upon layer, each piece perfumed and blessed. The connection between clothing and rest was not accidental. The living dressed for night as the dead were dressed for eternity. In both, the purpose was preservation, peace, and protection. Among the stranger finds in tombs are linen garments embroidered with small prayers. These short phrases invoked gods like Bez or Taweret, guardians of childbirth and domestic safety. Some scholars believe such inscriptions were worn at night to protect the wearer's dreams. You can imagine the comfort of that. Lying in darkness, knowing that words stitched into your garment watched over you as you slept. A small curiosity found in later Greco-Egyptian writings mentions that linen could absorb starlight. It was said that if you left a white sheet on the roof overnight, it would collect the blessing of the sky, making it stronger and purer. Whether symbolic or literal, it speaks to a culture that saw even fabric as alive with energy. You breathe deeply and listen to the faint rustle of fabric shifting as the family turns in their sleep. The sounds are delicate, the creak of mats, the brush of linen against skin, the sigh of someone finding a more comfortable position. The air is thick with quiet warmth, the kind that feels earned. It is tempting to think about how differently the classes might have slept. The noblewoman with her embroidered robe, the farmer with his patched wrap, the child with nothing but a sheet of rough linen. Yet in the end, the cold treated them all the same. Night reduced rank to breath and body, and linen embraced them equally. Outside, a faint howl rises and fades. The dog by the doorway stirs but does not rise. The moon moves slightly, its light shifting across the floor. You feel the smooth weight of linen against your chest, and think of all the hands that spun, wove, and washed it. Each thread a part of a larger story, each garment an echo of human need turned graceful. You close your eyes again, wrapped in the same calm that carried millions before you into dreams. The linen cools, then warms again with your breath. The desert wind moves outside, indifferent but harmless. And somewhere in that quiet, you realize that warmth has never been only about heat. It has always been about belonging to a house, a family, a rhythm of life that endures even in the coldest dark. The air inside the room feels heavy with warmth now, but a faint motion near the window stirs it gently. The desert night does not stay still for long. You turn your face toward that slit in the wall and feel a small draft, soft but cool, gliding across your cheek. The ancient builders understood that even a breeze could be tamed if you knew how to listen to it. Egyptian windows were small, narrow, and carefully placed. They were never meant for grand views but for balance. The openings faced prevailing winds from the Nile and were designed to allow air to flow in without letting sand invade. In some houses, woven mats hung across the slits, dampened at twilight to cool the air that passed through. The principle was simple. Water, wind, and clay could work together to create comfort. The result was a living form of ventilation, centuries before the word existed. Archaeologists who have studied the remains of domestic walls often point to the alignment of windows as evidence of careful planning. Even small village homes followed the same pattern as palaces, facing east and west, never north and south. The reasoning was practical. The morning sun could warm the rooms at dawn, and by evening, the openings on the opposite side let hot air escape. The Egyptians were not improvising, they were engineering the air itself. It is widely accepted that this architectural knowledge came from generations of trial and adjustment. Builders experimented with direction, thickness, and shape until the walls learned to breathe. To stand in one of these homes is to feel that intelligence still at work. the steady exchange between inside and outside that never ends. Among the more curious discoveries from excavation is the presence of small reed shutters, tied with cords, found in wealthier homes. They were designed to be lowered or rolled up like the blinds of today. When the night wind carried too much chill, the shutters could be dropped to filter the air. When the air felt heavy, they were lifted to invite movement. It was a delicate dance with nature, one that required attention rather than resistance. Scholars continue to discuss whether households also used scented herbs near these openings. Some suggest that pots of fresh plants, such as mint or lotus, were placed near windows to purify the breeze. Others doubt it, noting that few traces remain. Yet it is tempting to imagine the gentle smell of greenery drifting into the room as the night cooled. You rise from your mat and approach the small slit. The moon hangs low over the horizon, pale and round. The Nile reflects its light, a ribbon of silver dividing the darkness. The breeze that reaches you smells faintly of water and clay, carrying with it the memory of distant marshes. The cool air brushes your face, and you realize that it is not cold enough to bite, only to remind you that you are alive. The Egyptians called the north wind the breath of life, and believed it came from the mouths of gods. In temple reliefs, deities are shown exhaling an ankh, the symbol of living spirit, toward the faces of kings. Perhaps every night breeze carried a small piece of that same blessing. When it entered a home, it was not an intruder but a visitor. One small curiosity mentioned in a letter from the Ramesside period describes a woman thanking her brother for building a window that makes my house cooler than the reed huts of the fishermen. The tone is half teasing, half grateful. It is one of the earliest written compliments about good airflow, a reminder that even in the ancient world, people appreciated practical kindness. You step back from the window and watch how the air moves through the room. The flame of the relit lamp flickers toward the slit, bending slightly, then straightening again. The motion is small but constant, enough to keep the atmosphere from stagnating. Every home, no matter how simple, was alive with this invisible rhythm. It is tempting to picture the summer version of this same room. The mats soaked with cool water, the shutters open, the family sleeping close to the opening to catch the moving air. The cold months demand stillness. The hot ones depend on movement. The design of the house respects both. The Egyptians did not need machines or chimneys to command their climate. They had observation and patience. Outside, a faint rustle of palm leaves joins the sound of the wind. The trees sway slowly, their fronds whispering like voices speaking across centuries. The sound blends with the low murmur of the river. Together, they become a kind of music, the lullaby of air and water that lulled generations to sleep. The breeze reaches the oil lamp again, and for a moment the flame leans, its light moving across the faces of the sleepers. The father's brow smooths as he exhales. The child shifts closer to her mother, and the dog at the door sighs deeply. Even in stillness, everything breathes in sync with the moving air. It is difficult not to admire the perfection of this design. Every element serves more than one purpose. The mud walls hold warmth, the palm roof filters the sound of wind, and the narrow window lets in both coolness and stars. The room is both a shelter and a channel, guiding the desert's moods instead of fighting them. You lie down again, the mat cool under your back, the linen soft against your skin. The faint draft from the window brushes your toes, enough to remind you that outside this little haven lies the vast desert, patient and eternal. The balance between warmth and chill, between inside and out, feels precise, like a secret shared only with those who listen carefully. You breathe in the air that has traveled from the river, through palm leaves, across sand and clay, into this tiny opening. It smells of life itself. The Egyptians may not have had fire to heat their homes, but they had mastery of breath. And as you drift into quiet, that breath surrounds you, steady and kind, carrying you toward another hour of perfect, silent rest. The night deepens, yet you can sense the approach of dawn somewhere far beyond the horizon. The air feels different now, softer and lighter, as if the desert itself is resting. For the Egyptians, time was never a straight line. It was a cycle, like the rising and falling of the Nile, the passing of seasons, the shifting of warmth and cold. Sleep, too, belonged to that rhythm. In a land defined by its seasons of flood and harvest, the Egyptians adjusted every aspect of life according to the river's moods. The same was true for rest. During the inundation, when water spread across the floodplains, families often stayed indoors longer, the damp air bringing chill even during daylight. Mats and linens were doubled then, and homes became small islands of warmth in a world turned silver and wet. When the flood receded, life moved outside again, and nights were lighter, cooler, filled with the sound of frogs and wind through reeds. Archaeologists have long noted that Egyptian routines mirrored this seasonal dance. During the planting months, people rose before dawn, sleeping early after dark. But when the nights grew longer in winter, evenings became a time of quiet talk, weaving, and storytelling before rest. The pattern of sleep expanded and contracted like the river itself. It is well established from inscriptions and diaries that the ancient calendar divided the year into three great seasons: Akhet, the flood; Peret, the growing; and Shemu, the harvest. Each affected how people lived and, inevitably, how they slept. In Akhet, the nights were damp and cold, and homes remained sealed. In Shemu, when the desert heat returned, many households slept outside on rooftops or courtyards, wrapped in linen that cooled quickly under starlight. One appealing detail uncovered in workers' villages near Deir el-Medina is the presence of roof-access stairs built directly from the main room. These stairs led to flat rooftops where families would move their sleeping mats according to the season. You can imagine them climbing up at twilight, arms full of bedding, their laughter mingling with the sound of donkeys in the distance. Under the open sky, the air would be cooler, but the stars would keep watch, and the breeze off the river would keep the mosquitoes away. Some researchers have observed that in winter, people likely adjusted not only where they slept, but how. They probably rested in shorter intervals, waking before dawn to stoke oil lamps, drink warm beer, or check on animals. Egyptian medical papyri even refer to the morning chill and offer advice for treating stiff joints caused by it. Warm oil massaged onto the limbs appears as a common remedy. You can imagine an elder rubbing oil into his knees before lying down again, sighing in relief as the warmth spreads. Among the more curious finds from letters written between friends is the mention of the cold nights of Pere. One woman jokes that her husband cannot rise before Ra because his bones are frozen. Such lines reveal a world not of myth, but of ordinary discomfort and humor. The Egyptians, so often portrayed as distant gods in stone, also woke up grumbling about the cold. It is tempting to think that their understanding of the seasons went beyond mere observation. The Egyptians believed that every cycle of nature echoed the divine order of the universe. The cooling and warming of the land were not random, but part of Ma'at, the balance that governed all existence. To sleep comfortably in winter or to rest beneath the stars in summer was not just practical, it was alignment with cosmic rhythm. The family you watch now follows that rhythm instinctively. The father stirs in his sleep and adjusts the cloth around his shoulders. The child turns toward her mother, their breaths falling into unison. Outside, the wind has quieted. Even the animals are still. The temperature has dropped to its lowest point, but inside, the air holds steady. The mudbrick walls have done their work well. It is known from ancient records that sunrise was considered sacred, the moment of rebirth for both gods and mortals. Households often woke before first light to pray, bathe, and greet the sun with gratitude. In that sense, sleep was a small death, and waking was a resurrection. Each night, the cold desert symbolized the underworld. Each dawn, warmth returned like divine forgiveness. One curious account written by a scribe describes his dreams during the winter floods. He wrote, "The water speaks to me at night, cold on my skin but warm in my heart." It is difficult to say whether he meant the literal chill of damp air or the symbolic voice of the river, but his words capture the dual nature of Egyptian life. Comfort was always a conversation between hardship and grace. You sit quietly, imagining the transitions that marked the year, the weeks when blankets were folded away, when mats were carried to the roof again, when the air smelled of dry grain instead of silt. Each season brought its own kind of night, its own way of sleeping. There was no single answer to the cold, only constant adaptation. The oil lamp beside the wall flickers as a faint wind finds its way through the window slit. The flame bends, then straightens again. You realize that every movement of air in this house is part of that same grand cycle, a rhythm as old as the Nile's pulse. The cold tonight is not an enemy. It is a reminder that warmth is always earned. You draw the linen closer, breathe in the faint scent of oil still clinging to it, and let the rhythm carry you. The seasons turn, the river swells and falls, and the people sleep on, adjusting their lives to the patient logic of the land. As the first light of morning begins to gather beyond the horizon, you sense how perfectly the Egyptians balanced life between two extremes, the heat that demanded shelter and the cold that asked for closeness. You close your eyes again, aware that warmth is returning even before the sun appears. In the stillness before dawn, you can almost hear the whisper of the river promising another day. Morning light finally touches the horizon, soft and pale, spilling across the river like a slow awakening. The cold begins to loosen its grip on the mud-brick walls, and with it comes a new kind of silence. The house remains still, but your thoughts drift beyond its modest size toward grander places. The same desert night that chills this family also presses against the stone of temples, the plastered walls of palaces, and the silk-curtained rooms of nobles. Warmth, like devotion, took different forms across the social scale. In the noble estates along the Nile, comfort was both luxury and performance. The homes of high officials and priests were larger than the village houses but built on the same principles of climate control. Thick plastered walls held the day's heat, while courtyards collected the evening breeze. You can imagine stepping through one of those grand doorways now, the sound of sandals echoing against painted tiles. The air smells faintly of resin and linen, of wine, and cool water drawn from underground jars. Archaeologists generally agree that wealthier Egyptians slept in rooms specifically designed for temperature control. Many such chambers had slightly raised floors, sometimes made of limestone, which absorbed heat by day and released it gradually at night. The walls were whitewashed or covered in pale plaster to reflect sunlight during the day. Even in luxury, practicality remained the foundation of design. One intriguing discovery in the tomb of Queen Hetepheres, mother of Khufu, is her gilded wooden bed, perfectly preserved. It sits low, with lion legs carved at each corner and a headboard painted with protective symbols. The mattress was once stuffed with plant fiber, perhaps softened with linen or down. The craftsmanship is exquisite, yet its purpose remains simple: to hold warmth, to cradle sleep. The detail suggests that even royalty sought rest in materials familiar to commoners, only refined to perfection. It is tempting to imagine the night rituals of such a household. Servants would light oil lamps scented with myrrh, arrange fresh linen across the bed, and adjust curtains woven from papyrus fibers. Those curtains, hanging loosely from wooden rods, offered privacy and trapped body heat. Inside that small cocoon, the noble sleeper would find a climate of their own making. The faint hum of crickets from the gardens outside might drift through the window, mingling with the perfume of the lamps. A small curiosity uncovered in Theban villas is the presence of water basins placed in corners of bedrooms. These shallow pools cooled the air as evaporation occurred, a primitive yet effective form of air conditioning. The basins were often made of alabaster, smooth to the touch and reflective under lamplight. The gentle shimmer of water made the room feel both alive and tranquil. The combination of scent, light, and sound turned even rest into art. Experts continue to debate how common such luxuries were. Some argue that only the elite could afford these comforts, while others believe that aspects of noble living gradually influenced ordinary households. Perhaps the truth lies in imitation. Even the humblest villager might add a small pot of water near a sleeping space, copying what they imagined occurred in grander homes. In Egypt, the line between divine and domestic was always thin. You picture yourself walking through one of these mansions as night settles again. The floors are cool beneath your feet, smooth stone reflecting the last fire of the sunset. Servants move quietly, their voices low, as they prepare their master's chamber. Linen sheets are shaken out and folded neatly. A light cloth canopy hangs above the bed, filtering dust and insects. Near the doorway, a carved headrest waits, polished from years of use. It is widely known from temple murals that even the highest officials kept protective symbols near their sleeping places. Eyes of Horus, scarabs, and images of Anubis were painted or carved close to beds. These images were not mere decoration. They were thought to guard the sleeper from unseen dangers, the same way thick walls kept out the cold. Comfort, safety, and faith were bound together. Among the stranger finds in noble tombs are miniature beds placed as offerings, exact replicas of their real ones, complete with tiny linen sheets and pillows. The idea was clear. Eternal rest required the same comforts as mortal rest. The Egyptians saw no difference between how one slept at night and how one would sleep in eternity. The air inside such a chamber would have been cool at first, then gradually warmed by breath and movement. A noble might share the room with servants or family members depending on rank and circumstance. Privacy existed, but warmth still came from proximity. The architecture might be lavish, but the human need was the same. A body needed another's breath nearby to feel secure against the dark. One tablet found in the archives of Amarna records a royal complaint about drafts in a palace chamber. "The wind enters like a serpent," it reads, "and steals my sleep." The line feels strangely familiar, proof that even among gold and stone, the struggle for warmth and rest was universal. You can almost smile at the image of a weary queen scolding her attendants for the chill. You turn your thoughts back to the family in the small mud-brick house. Their mats may be humble, but the principles guiding their rest are the same as those shaping the chambers of nobles. Walls that breathe, cloth that insulates, faith that protects, companionship that warms. Whether under gilded canopy or palm roof, all Egyptians lived within the same delicate balance of elements. The moon climbs higher now, its light touching the tips of the distant temple pylons. The same air that cools the family's home moves silently through the courtyards of priests, across pools lined with stone lilies, through rooms where painted gods guard empty beds. For a moment, all of Egypt sleeps together: the farmer, the priest, the queen, and the child. The difference is only in the number of lamps still burning. You lie back, picturing the stillness of that unity. The cold outside continues, but within the walls of this ancient civilization, warmth flows from knowledge, from ritual, from trust in the rhythm of nature. Whether in a palace of gold or a hut of clay, the night belongs equally to all. The quiet that lingers after midnight feels thick enough to touch. The moonlight now rests on the packed floor, and through the shadows you can almost make out the figures of those who sleep closest to the doorway. They are not family, but servants. Their presence speaks volumes about how hierarchy stretched even into the night. Yet the cold was an equalizer. Status dictated where one lay, but warmth blurred the distance between the powerful and the humble. In every large household, servants formed the invisible machinery of comfort. They tended lamps, fetched oil, and ensured that their masters' beds were properly arranged. Some slept near storerooms or kitchens, others by the main entrance. Their duties never truly ended. Even in rest, they remained half alert, ready to rise if a door creaked or a flame guttered out. You picture them now, wrapped in simple cloth, lying near the threshold like silent guardians. Archaeological evidence from noble residences at Amarna and Thebes reveals small adjoining rooms that were likely used by household staff. These spaces were narrow, barely large enough for 2 mats. The walls were plain and undecorated, yet the same principles of construction applied. The mud and plaster kept them warm, and the air remained breathable. A servant's room might lack ornament, but it shared the same rhythm of heat and cool, light and dark, as any chamber in the house. It is widely acknowledged that servants' sleeping arrangements followed a clear social pattern. The closer one slept to the master's quarters, the higher the trust. Some personal attendants, especially those charged with guarding treasures or assisting noble women, slept just outside the main door. They were both protectors and witnesses, part of the architecture of power. A particularly revealing letter from the New Kingdom describes a house steward asking for permission to move his sleeping mat closer to the main hall, citing the cold of the night as an excuse. The phrasing is polite, but the meaning is layered. To move closer to the master was to rise in rank. Warmth was not only physical comfort, it symbolized privilege. One appealing detail found in tomb art shows servants sleeping beside storage jars or near hearths used for cooking. The residual heat from pottery or dying embers provided a modest kind of luxury. In these small comforts, you see humanity more than servitude. The servants did not control the fire, but they understood how to borrow its memory. There is ongoing discussion among Egyptologists about how these lower quarters were managed during the cold season. Some suggest that servants shared blankets of woven papyrus or coarse wool, layering them as protection against chill. Others believe that they slept in shifts, one group waking as another rested, keeping a constant rhythm of activity that maintained body warmth within confined spaces. Either version suggests an instinct for adaptation rather than suffering. You glance again toward the shadowed figures near the door. Their shapes are barely visible, yet the faint sound of breathing fills the room. The warmth of their bodies merges with that of their masters farther inside, creating a subtle gradient of comfort from one end of the household to the other. The hierarchy may be firm by daylight, but in the quiet of night, all are equal participants in survival. It is tempting to imagine the small talk that might have filled these servant spaces before sleep. A whisper about the day's chores, a joke about a clumsy overseer, a song hummed softly to ease the mind. Some fragments of workers' graffiti discovered in ancient villages record short verses, simple and humorous, about the exhaustion of long days. Perhaps these songs echoed through the hallways as servants prepared for rest, their laughter rising briefly above the hum of insects outside. A curious fragment of a love poem found in a servant's chamber speaks of sleeping near the sandal of my beloved lady. Scholars have debated whether it refers to romantic affection or devotion to a mistress of higher status. Either way, it hints at the intimacy that could grow even within strict social boundaries. Warmth has always been a bridge between people, even across lines drawn by wealth and power. You can almost see one of them now, a young attendant shifting quietly to tuck his cloak closer. His fingers are rough from work, but his face softens as he drifts towards sleep. The moonlight touches his hair, the same light that spills across the master's golden bed. In that shared illumination, the distinctions of rank fade. What remains is the universal need for rest, for a few hours of release from duty. According to administrative texts, some households rotated their servants' positions seasonally. During colder months, indoor workers took night watch while others tended fires or animals outside. This rotation ensured that no one suffered too long in the open. The Egyptians approached warmth as a communal resource, managed even within hierarchy. The stillness deepens. The noble in his curtained bed turns slightly, his breathing steady. Outside the door, the servant's hand rests lightly on the threshold, his body curled close to the wall. The clay beneath him has been warmed by the air that seeps from the inner room. Without realizing it, he benefits from the same heat his labor helps maintain. It is striking how much of Egyptian life relied on this silent exchange of energy. The walls gave warmth to the people, who gave warmth to each other, who in turn gave their strength to the land. Every layer depended on the next, Even the lowest sleeper was part of a cycle that kept the civilization alive. You close your eyes and imagine the house at its most peaceful. No sound, no movement, only breath. The servants at the doorway, the family inside, the animals curled in corners, all contained within the same steady cocoon. The night may belong to rank by name, but warmth belongs to everyone. And in that equality of temperature, Egypt found a small but perfect harmony. The night stretches on, and your thoughts drift beyond the walls of homes and palaces. Somewhere far from the river, in the vast openness where sand meets sky, another kind of sleeper prepares for the cold. These are the travelers, the nomads, the traders, the guards of caravans. They carry warmth not in walls but in motion. Out here, the desert is an endless stage of shifting dunes and stars sharp enough to pierce the dark. The cold descends faster than breath, stealing heat from stone, from skin, from memory. You crouch beside a small camp on the edge of the western desert. The fire has already burned low, reduced to a faint red glow. The air tastes of smoke and salt. The people gathered here are wrapping themselves in layers of wool and leather, their movements slow and deliberate. They have traveled through the day's burning heat, and now the sand that scorched their feet chills them to the bone. Archaeologists have found countless traces of such camps. Circles of blackened stones where fires once burned, fragments of pottery, bits of woven rope, and hardened patches of trampled sand. From these remains, researchers piece together the habits of ancient desert travelers. Warmth, it seems, was less about heat and more about protection. The desert could not be conquered, it could only be respected. Most evidence suggests that nomads used wool blankets woven thick and coarse, often layered over cloaks of animal hide. The wool trapped air, creating insulation against both heat and cold. Goats and sheep provided not only meat and milk, but also the fibers that made survival possible. A well-made wool cloak was worth as much as gold to a traveler who faced the desert night. One unusual detail uncovered in a caravan site near Dakhla Oasis includes remnants of a bed made entirely of leather strips stretched across a wooden frame. It must have been light enough to carry and strong enough to hold warmth above the freezing sand. The air beneath such a bed would move slowly, reducing the shock of cold rising from the ground. The ingenuity of it is remarkable. Researchers continue to debate how much reliance travelers placed on fire for warmth. Some argue that small fires were used primarily for cooking and light, not heating. The open desert made large flames dangerous, visible for miles and capable of attracting both predators and thieves. Others believe that travelers built shallow pits shielded by rocks to hold embers through the night. Either way, fire in the desert was never about comfort. It was survival's flicker, fleeting and fragile. You move closer to the imagined travelers. Their voices are low, speaking in a rhythm that fits the wind. One man adjusts his cloak, pulling it higher around his ears. Another rubs oil onto a camel's hide, whispering softly to calm it. The smell of warm animal breath mixes with the faint scent of burning acacia wood. Every sound feels magnified in this vast silence. A charming touch recorded in desert poetry from later Egyptian texts describes travelers sharing songs to stay awake through the coldest hours. "We sang to trick the wind," one line reads, "and when we stopped it answered." The words reveal both humor and respect for the elements. Singing was warmth of another kind, something the desert could not steal. The air thickens as the temperature continues to drop. You can see the shimmer of frost forming on the edge of a clay jar. The surface of the sand, once soft, hardens beneath the night's chill. The travelers draw closer together, their cloaks overlapping, their shared breath creating small clouds that vanish as quickly as they appear. Warmth becomes a collective act, just as it did inside the houses by the Nile. Out here, the family is chosen by need, not blood. It is tempting to think of these people as wanderers without home, yet the desert itself is their shelter. The dunes protect them from the wind, the stars guide their course, and the sand, though merciless, remembers the day's heat just long enough to share a whisper of it back. Each grain holds the faint echo of the Sunday. Among the stranger discoveries from burial sites of desert travelers are amulets carved in the shape of the sun disk. Some bear inscriptions invoking Ra to light the darkness beneath the sand. These small tokens suggest that the cold of night was not only physical but spiritual. To survive the freezing air was to be reminded that light always returns. Faith, as much as fire, kept them alive. The wind begins to shift, carrying with it a deep, rhythmic sound. It is the call of a desert owl, echoing across the dunes. The travelers huddle closer. Their conversation fades into stillness. One of them tilts his head back to study the stars, tracing familiar constellations with a finger. The same patterns that priests carved into temple ceilings now guide his route home. The desert is not empty. It is full of direction, of signs waiting to be read. You sit among them, wrapped in the same borrowed heat. The air around you smells of dust, sweat, and a faint sweetness of wool. Your fingers tingle from the cold, but within the circle of bodies there is safety. This shared space becomes a moving home, fragile yet enduring. The night presses harder, but it cannot enter the small boundary they have created together. It is remarkable to think that these travelers and the villagers along the Nile faced the same question each night: how to stay warm without fire. Yet both found their answers in cooperation, design, and understanding. The tools were different, but the wisdom was the same. As the hours stretch toward dawn, the stars begin to fade. The travelers stir, preparing for the long walk ahead. Their blankets and mats will soon be rolled, their fires buried under sand. The desert offers no permanence, only rhythm. You watch as they disappear into the pale horizon, leaving behind nothing but footprints and the faint scent of smoke. The silence that follows feels vast but not lonely. The desert has reclaimed its breath, holding its chill until the sun returns. And as you stand there, the last warmth of their fire brushing against your hands, you understand that warmth in Egypt was never about flame. It was about resilience, a constant conversation between people and the land that shaped them. You stay with the memory of the desert caravan until the wind itself seems to fade, replaced by another sound entirely. It begins as a faint murmur, distant and hollow, almost mistaken for your own heartbeat. Then it grows clearer, layered and alive. This is the sound of a desert night once all human voices have gone silent. It is not truly quiet. The desert is a patient musician, playing in tones most people never hear. The sand hisses faintly as grains slide against one another, moved by tiny currents of air. Somewhere far off, a jackal calls, the note long and lonely, rising into the thin air and vanishing. A moment later, another answers. Between the two calls, you can hear the wind's low hum, brushing across dune crests, carving invisible ripples that shift with every hour. The Egyptians listened to this sound every night. For them, it was not emptiness, but a kind of rhythm. The word for silence in ancient Egyptian also meant peace, but it did not mean the absence of sound. It meant the balance of it, the harmony between stillness and motion. You can imagine a family lying awake, listening to that endless whisper outside their home, feeling small but not afraid. Archaeologists often mention how desert acoustics influenced Egyptian life. Temples were built to echo prayers softly, tombs carved to hold whispers rather than shouts. Even in architecture, sound was treated as something sacred. It is easy to see how the natural world shaped this understanding. When every sound carries for miles, you learn to speak gently. A well-documented feature of the desert night is the way it amplifies distance. What happens a mile away might sound as if it is at your door. Travelers wrote of hearing camel bells long before the animals appeared, and of footsteps echoing where no one walked. This effect blurred the line between reality and imagination. Perhaps this is why so many Egyptian myths describe voices carried on the wind, messages from gods or spirits speaking softly enough for only the calm to hear. One curious inscription carved on a limestone shard from Middle Egypt tells of a man who heard the desert breathe and thought it the song of his soul. Scholars still discuss whether it was poetic exaggeration or mystical testimony. Either way, the sentiment feels true. Standing in that vast space, surrounded by the unseen, it is easy to believe the earth itself speaks. You listen now, eyes closed. The wind slides through cracks in the wall, soft and steady. The roof above you creaks faintly as the palm fronds shift. Each sound seems magnified by the stillness. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, answered by another. Then silence returns, smooth and heavy. The Egyptians lived with this soundscape every night. It shaped their idea of safety. Noise could mean intrusion, but silence meant harmony. The absence of disturbance meant the gods were at rest, that the order of the world was unbroken. To fall asleep to these sounds was to feel part of something larger than fear. A small curiosity mentioned in a traveler's diary from the late period describes the experience of sleeping in the open desert. I felt as though the stars themselves hummed. Modern readers might smile at the exaggeration, but anyone who has stood beneath that sky knows the feeling. The air is so dry and thin that your own pulse seems to echo in your ears. It feels as though the universe is breathing beside you. The family in the Mudbrick house hears those same sounds, softened by walls but not erased. The father stirs slightly, perhaps listening to make sure the animals outside are still calm. The mother shifts, wrapping the child closer. The dog at the door raises its head once, then rests again. The desert sings, and life adjusts its tempo. It is widely accepted that Egyptians saw the night not as danger, but as transformation. The god Ra traveled through the underworld each evening, bringing light back at dawn. The noises of darkness were reminders of his journey, echoes of the unseen world beneath the sand. To listen without fear was to show faith. You can almost hear what they heard, the low whistle of wind slipping past palm leaves, the rustle of reeds along the riverbank, the occasional splash of a fish breaking the surface of the Nile. The sounds overlap and fade, a perfect orchestra of nature. No drum or harp could rival its depth. One beautiful but less-known artifact, a small papyrus fragment, records a lullaby meant to calm a restless child. Sleep now, little one. The wind carries Ra's boat. The stars are his oars. The night guards you with gentle noise. The words reveal how sound became comfort. The desert was not silence. It was a cradle. You open your eyes again. The walls seem to vibrate faintly with the rhythm of wind. The house is alive, responding to its environment with the same calm acceptance that its builders intended. The cold outside remains, but it is no longer menacing. It is simply part of the music. As you lie back down, the last sound you notice is your own breath mingling with the air. It falls into the same pace as the wind, a slow, timeless rhythm that feels older than language. You realize then that warmth does not always mean fire or fabric. Sometimes it comes from this harmony between body and world, from knowing that even the coldest night has a song meant only for those who are still enough to hear it. The wind drifts through once more, brushing your hair, then moves away into the desert, carrying with it every echo. The world returns to quiet, and in that quiet, you find peace. The rhythm of the wind fades as sleep deepens, and you find yourself drifting between waking and dreaming, that thin borderland the Egyptians believed to be sacred. In their world, dreams were not random flashes of imagination, but messages carried across the veil by divine hands. Every sleeper was, in a small way, a prophet. You shift slightly on your mat and imagine yourself in their place, the quiet hum of night giving way to the silence of thought. The Egyptians believed that the soul traveled during sleep, leaving the body behind to wander in the company of gods or ancestors. When morning came, it returned with stories, warnings, or blessings. To close your eyes, then, was to enter another kind of life. Archaeologists have uncovered fragments of papyri that record dreams as carefully as one might record the rise of the river. The Dream Book from Deir el-Medina is the most famous example. On it, a scribe listed hundreds of dream symbols with their meanings. To dream of eating crocodile meat meant victory over enemies. To see oneself drinking wine meant happiness. The Egyptians treated dreams as maps, guiding them through unseen lands of emotion and fate. One remarkable feature of this ancient text is its neutrality. Dreams were neither inherently good nor evil. Their power depended on interpretation. A dream could heal or harm, bless or warn, depending on who told its story. It was a dialogue between the mortal and the divine, never an accident. A small curiosity mentioned in letters found near Thebes tells of a woman who dreamed her deceased husband returned to complain about a broken promise. The next day, she brought offerings to his tomb, leaving bread and beer. The gesture shows how seriously people took the language of the night. To ignore a dream was to ignore advice from another world. It is widely accepted among Egyptologists that temples dedicated to certain gods functioned as dream sanctuaries. The most famous were those of Imhotep, the deified physician. People would sleep within temple walls, hoping for a healing vision. Priests anointed them with oils and recited calming hymns before they lay down. In this sacred stillness, dreams were invited deliberately, courted like honored guests. You can almost imagine it now. A man lying on a stone floor, polished smooth by centuries of footsteps, his head resting on a folded cloak. The temple air smells of incense and cool water. He closes his eyes as priests chant softly around him. In the darkness behind his eyelids, the gods are said to whisper cures and blessings. By morning, he might wake healed, or at least comforted by the belief that he had been seen. The Egyptians spoke of the Ba, the soul that could move freely, and the Ka, the life force that remained with the body. During sleep, the two were thought to meet briefly, sharing information gathered from both realms. Dreams were that conversation made visible. You can almost feel it now, that sensation of floating, of being part of a larger consciousness that stretches beyond your own heartbeat. One intriguing discovery inside tomb inscriptions describes pharaohs claiming to have received orders from gods through dreams. Thutmose IV, for instance, recorded how the Sphinx spoke to him while he slept beneath it, promising kingship if he would clear the sand from its body. Whether political propaganda or genuine belief, the story shows how the boundary between night and destiny could blur. Modern scholars still discuss whether such dream interpretation was formalized ritual or everyday habit. Some think that only priests and scribes analyzed them systematically, while others argue that every household had its own form of folk dream reading. Perhaps a grandmother explained to a child what a falcon or a snake meant in the world of sleep. The evidence is incomplete, but the persistence of dream imagery in letters and poems suggests it was a shared practice, woven into daily life. The idea of dreaming held a moral weight too. To dream well was a sign of balance. A disturbed dream hinted at disorder in body or spirit. The Egyptians used charms to guard their sleep just as they used amulets to protect their homes. Small figurines of Bez, the dwarf god of laughter and defense, were placed near beds to frighten away nightmares. His grinning face can still be found carved into walls, a reminder that even the gods understood bad dreams. You roll onto your side and feel the air cool against your cheek. The lamp's last ember glows faintly, its light soft enough to feel like starlight. In that hush, you understand why dreams mattered so deeply to these people. The desert night was vast and indifferent, but within the mind, entire worlds bloomed. Dreams gave meaning to silence. A rather endearing passage from an ancient love poem reads, "I see you in my dreams more sweetly than in daylight." It suggests that dreams were also a refuge for affection, a way for lovers separated by distance or death to meet again. To dream of someone was to call them back for a moment, to share the warmth of memory when the world outside was cold. You close your eyes again, listening to the faint wind beyond the wall, the same sound that lulled countless dreamers into visions of gods, lovers, and distant lands. The Egyptians would have called this the threshold of night, the point where the soul steps out quietly to wander. For a brief instant, you feel yourself part of that procession of dreamers stretching across millennia. The cold remains outside, unable to touch the warmth that grows within the mind. Here, in this world of silence and symbols, You are safe, watched over by the same unseen forces that guarded sleepers by the Nile. You let your breath slow, and in that stillness, you too begin to dream. The dreams fade like smoke at sunrise. You wake slowly, still wrapped in warmth, and the fading echo of God's whispers. The air carries that familiar chill that lingers before the first light strikes the horizon. The river murmurs nearby, and the first birds begin their calls. The world of sleep recedes, yet something remains of it, as though the mind and the body still float between realms. In ancient Egypt, the bed itself was not only a place for sleeping, it was a symbol of rebirth and the eternal cycle of night and morning. To lie down was to mimic the sun sinking beyond the western hills, and to rise was to follow its return from the underworld. The simple act of sleeping carried cosmic weight. You glanced toward the carved wooden frame beside you, perhaps plain, perhaps gilded depending on one's station. The Egyptians saw no distinction between the sacred and the ordinary when it came to design. A bed could be a spiritual object as much as a tool for comfort. The raised headrest, the carved legs, the ornaments of lotus or papyrus all represented stability, renewal, and the grace of life restored. Archaeologists have found that even the most modest sleeping platforms reflected this belief. In tombs, beds were painted with symbols of the sky goddess Nut or the earth god Geb, representing heaven embracing the sleeper. The design echoed the belief that the body, resting on earth, was still connected to divine forces above. Each night was an act of faith that dawn would return. One fascinating discovery from the tomb of Tutankhamun is a ceremonial bed shaped like the curve of a lion's back, the head and tail forming the frame. Its form signified strength, vigilance, and the protective power of the animal kingdom. Though such a bed was clearly for a king, smaller wooden versions have been found in less exalted burials, suggesting that ordinary people adopted the same imagery. The bed was more than furniture, it was a promise. A detail that rarely makes it into textbooks is that many beds were slightly curved in the middle. This shape, besides keeping the sleeper from rolling off, was said to represent the gentle arc of the sun's daily journey. To rest inside it was to take part in that celestial path, to mirror the heavens in your sleep. Scholars continue to discuss how deeply these symbolic meanings influence daily life. Some argue that the associations of the bed with death and rebirth were mainly reserved for royal or religious contexts, while others believe the entire society lived by this rhythm unconsciously. The evidence is subtle but pervasive. From household shrines to the language of lullabies, sleep and eternity were never far apart. You let your hand trace the imaginary lines of such a bed. The polished wood is cool, the carvings smooth beneath your fingertips. Every mark feels deliberate. Even the humble worker who could afford only a reed mat would know that to lie down at night was to rehearse the soul's journey. The difference between life and afterlife was simply a matter of waking again. One small curiosity mentioned in an old papyrus concerns the bed of offerings, a ritual object used in temples. Priests placed small trays shaped like beds upon altars, arranging food and drink atop them. The symbolism was clear. Nourishment was a form of awakening, the soul feeding to rise again. The same shape that held a sleeper by night could hold sustenance for eternity. According to funeral texts, the deceased would lie upon a bed in the tomb, while priests chanted hymns calling the soul to rise. This parallel between sleep and resurrection was not metaphorical to the Egyptians, it was their understanding of existence. To them, the bed connected both worlds, the physical and the spiritual. Every dawn reaffirmed the triumph of life over darkness. It is tempting to imagine a child growing up surrounded by these ideas, watching a parent smooth out the sleeping mat each morning, whispering thanks for another return from the underworld of dreams. Even the smallest gestures carried sacred echoes. Perhaps this awareness is what gave Egyptian life its calmness, its steady rhythm. One beautifully preserved carving shows a couple reclining together, their bodies drawn in profile, hands touching lightly. Behind them, A lotus blooms, a symbol of rebirth that opened with the sun each day. It is not an image of passion, but of peace. The bed beneath them represents both intimacy and eternity, the harmony of human and cosmic rest. You listen again to the quiet house, the faint sound of footsteps from someone rising early. The mat beneath you holds the warmth of the night, and for a moment you imagine it as more than comfort. It feels like continuity, the same sleep and waking shared by countless others before you. The awareness brings a strange stillness, as if time itself is holding its breath. If the ancient scribes were right, to wake was to be reborn. The Egyptians did not fear the night because they trusted the pattern. Darkness was never final. It was a pause, a gathering of strength. The bed was both cradle and tomb, both beginning and end. Outside, the first edge of sunlight reaches the horizon, spilling through the narrow window. It paints the wall with pale gold. The cold begins to dissolve, replaced by a growing warmth that feels almost sacred. You draw in a slow breath and understand why the Egyptians saw the morning not as repetition, but renewal. As the light touches your skin, you realize that their way of sleeping was also a philosophy of life. Every rest a surrender to the universe, every waking a miracle. And in this fragile balance between night and day, they found not just survival, but serenity. The light continues to climb, flooding the room with warmth. Yet your thoughts travel deeper, past the waking world, into the stillness of tombs where the Egyptians carried their comforts for eternity. The same care that shaped their nights in life shaped their rest in death. For them, the end of breath was not the end of sleep but its perfection. The ancient artisans prepared burial chambers as though they were bedrooms, waiting for their masters to return. Every detail was designed for comfort. Wooden beds, carved headrests, and folded linens were placed beside the mummified body, as if the sleeper might wake and stretch at any moment. The logic was simple. What kept a person warm in this world would keep the soul at peace in the next. Archaeologists have discovered tombs filled with such domestic intimacy. In one from the Middle Kingdom, a low bed stands beside the sarcophagus, complete with its woven mat and small cushion. The walls are painted with scenes of servants bringing blankets, jars of scented oil, and trays of food. Even death required preparation for the cold desert night. It is well documented that the dead were provided with headrests carved from wood, stone, or alabaster. The curved shape held the skull gently above the surface, just as in life. Some were decorated with prayers or images of protective deities to guard the sleeper from evil spirits. The practical design doubled as a sacred charm. To support the head was to preserve identity, for the head held the senses and the spirit. A particularly striking example lies in the tomb of Queen Hetepheres, where her gilded bed rests alongside her chair and chest of linen. The arrangement looks less like a grave and more like a room waiting for her return. Even the placement of each object followed rules of comfort. The bed facing west, toward the land of the dead, so that her soul could rise with the sun from that direction each morning. Among the more surprising discoveries are fragments of blankets found in burial sites, woven so tightly that the fibers have survived thousands of years. Some contain faint traces of blue dye, perhaps meant to imitate the color of the sky. One might imagine that lying under such a covering felt like resting beneath heaven itself. Egyptologists often remark that this attention to comfort was not vanity but theology. In Egyptian thought, the afterlife mirrored the living world. The soul needed sleep, food, and warmth, just as it had on earth. The tomb, therefore, was not a place of cold stone, but a carefully arranged home. Death was simply another journey through night. A small curiosity recorded in workers' notes from the Valley of the Kings describes how craftsmen were instructed to carve beds and headrests into the rock when a noble family could not afford imported furniture. The symbolism mattered more than the material. Even a stone bed, painted carefully, was enough to assure the spirit of peace. According to the ancient funerary texts, the deceased was urged to sleep in safety under the protection of Anubis, until Ra calls at dawn. This line captures the entire philosophy of Egyptian burial. Sleep as divine trust, not fear. To rest within the earth was to surrender to the same cycle that ruled the stars. Some researchers have pointed out that many burial beds were built shorter than human length. This was not a mistake, but a sign of faith. The shorter frame symbolized containment, the idea that the soul no longer needed the same physical space. Others interpret it as a way to cradle the body more tightly, preserving warmth in a figurative sense. You picture yourself inside one of these tombs now, where silence feels like stone turned to air. The walls are covered in bright color despite the darkness. There are stars painted across the ceiling, constellations carefully arranged to mirror the sky above. The air smells faintly of resin, honey, and the dry sweetness of old linen. The temperature never changes here. It is cool, eternal, neither day nor night. It is tempting to feel uneasy in such stillness, but the Egyptians would have felt peace. They believed that each tomb was the womb of the afterlife, the place from which new existence began. To lie here was to wait for the first light of the eternal dawn. The concept of warmth had become metaphysical. The fire was not of flame but of spirit. One particularly moving find in a modest tomb near Abydos includes a small carved figure of a woman tucked beside the headrest. Her hands hold a lotus flower, a symbol of rebirth. Archaeologists interpret her as a representation of a loved one, perhaps placed there to accompany the sleeper forever. Even in death, companionship and comfort were carried along. The Egyptians perfected the art of continuity. The same walls that shielded them from the desert cold became the stone of their graves. The same mats that cushioned them in life were reproduced in painting and carving to cushion eternity. To them, warmth and rest were not temporary privileges, but sacred rights. You breathe slowly, imagining the darkness within those tombs, not as emptiness, but as infinite calm. The desert above may shift endlessly, but below it, stillness reigns. The soul sleeps, wrapped not in linen but in faith. The morning that follows will not be of sunlight but of eternity itself. The morning light above the tomb fades from your thoughts as you turn toward those who made such perfection possible. Every smooth bed frame, every linen fold, every carved headrest passed through the hands of craftsmen. Their work gave shape to the Egyptian night. Without them, the warmth of sleep would have vanished with the day. You picture them now in the village of Deir el-Medina, where the artisans of the royal tombs lived. The narrow streets are already stirring as dawn breaks. Men emerge from small homes with tools in baskets, their fingers still stiff from the cool air. They greet each other quietly, stretching before the walk to the valley. The desert wind moves through the alleyways, lifting dust that glows gold in the sunrise. These craftsmen understood the relationship between life and rest better than anyone. They carved the beds on which kings would sleep forever, but at night they lay down on mats of woven reeds in homes nearly identical to the ones they decorated in stone. Their days were filled with chisels, mallets, and sawdust, and their nights with the same pursuit of comfort they offered their gods and rulers. Archaeological records tell us that carpenters and joiners were respected tradesmen. They worked with acacia, sycamore, and tamarisk wood, shaping each piece with simple copper tools. The precision of their joints, still firm after thousands of years, reveals both skill and patience. It is widely accepted that Egyptian furniture was among the finest of the ancient world, not because it was lavish, but because it was balanced. Every curve of a leg, every slope of a headrest, followed both function and grace. One delightful discovery from a carpenter's tomb includes a small wooden model of a workshop. It shows men sawing, sanding, and polishing, their faces carved with concentration. Nearby lies a miniature bed and stool, perhaps meant to serve the artisan in the afterlife. Even creators required comfort in eternity. Experts continue to discuss whether these artisans built for themselves during the same hours they worked for their masters, or whether special days were allowed for personal craft. The administrative texts of the period mention quiet work, tasks performed at home for one's family. It is tempting to imagine a carpenter sitting under lamplight, shaping a small headrest for his child, smiling at the soft rhythm of the file against wood. You step into one of their workshops in your mind. The scent of sawdust fills the air, mixed with resin and oil. The walls are close, but the sound of scraping tools and muted chatter makes the space feel alive. One craftsman leans over a plank, drawing lines with a string of red ochre. Another polishes a finished surface with a piece of smooth sandstone until it gleams. The rhythm of their work echoes the rhythm of breathing, steady and unhurried. According to inscriptions found on ostraca, these artisans spoke of their tools with affection. "My adze knows my thoughts," one wrote, meaning his instrument moved as if guided by instinct. Such intimacy between hand and tool explains why the furniture they created seems almost alive. Each piece carries the quiet confidence of someone who has studied nature closely. A curious find in an ancient workshop was a pile of discarded shavings shaped like thin curls. Some were burned for fuel, others left untouched. They are the remains of practice, the physical trace of thought. To hold one between your fingers would be to touch a moment of creation preserved in dust. The linen weavers shared this same devotion. In small courtyards, women twisted flax fibers into thread, their movements repetitive and sure. The sound of spinning wheels mingled with birdsong, forming a domestic symphony. Their work was often unrecorded, yet every piece of cloth found in tomb or temple passed through hands like theirs. The softness that wrapped the dead and warmed the living came from patient labor done under the open sky. One fragment of an old song recorded by scribes celebrates these weavers. They bring comfort to the house as Ra brings warmth to the fields. The line honors their craft as essential, not secondary. Without their work, no noble could rest. No child could sleep through the desert chill. It is easy to imagine that artisans found pride in such continuity. To create an object that lasted beyond one's lifetime was to touch eternity. The same hand that carved a chair for a king might also mend a stool for a neighbor. The boundaries between grandeur and simplicity blurred in the glow of the workshop's light. A record found on a shard of pottery from Deir el-Medina reveals a craftsman's small complaint. The wood splits when the air is dry, yet the scribe still demands beauty. There is humor in the line, but also truth. Perfection was expected even when nature resisted. Perhaps that resistance gave the work its soul. You can almost hear the murmur of their day ending, the men walking home with sawdust on their hair, the women folding finished cloth into baskets. The smell of baked bread drifts from nearby ovens. Children run to meet them, wrapping small arms around their waists. The tools are set aside, and for a while, the hands that built the monuments of kings belong again to families. As night returns, they light their small lamps and lay down on their own creations. The carpenter on his reed mat, the weaver beneath the cloth she spun that morning, both resting in the same cycle they served. They will wake to carve and weave again, shaping the materials of the earth into objects that hold both warmth and meaning. You close your eyes, hearing the faint rasp of a plane smoothing wood, the whisper of flax sliding through fingers. These sounds are the heartbeat of civilization, the quiet labor that made beauty practical. The Egyptians built not to defy time, but to make each night more bearable, each morning more certain. And in that rhythm, the warmth of the human hand outlived the chill of the desert. The artisans fade from your imagination, their steady tools replaced by the hush of evening again. You are back inside the small mudbrick house by the Nile, where the family begins its nightly routine. The scent of herbs fills the air, sharp and soothing. A small clay bowl sits beside the mother's mat, steam rising faintly from its surface. She stirs it with a reed stick, testing the heat before dipping a cloth into the mixture. Egyptians believed that comfort began before sleep. They prepared their bodies as carefully as they prepared their beds. Many of their remedies were drawn from the same landscape that shaped their days. Honey from the hives near the river, mint from the gardens, myrrh from distant deserts. Each ingredient was both medicine and blessing. Archaeological records and surviving medical papyri show that the Egyptians practiced a kind of gentle home therapy, long before modern medicine. Recipes for ointments and infusions fill those ancient texts. Some were meant for pain, others for dreams, and some simply for the pleasure of calm. It is widely recognized among scholars that these preparations reflected a deep understanding of balance, the harmony between body, spirit, and the rhythm of nature. The bowl before you contains warm oil mixed with crushed herbs. The mother rubs it over her husband's hands, then along her own wrists. The scent of thyme and juniper fills the air, blending with the smell of baked clay. These oils help the blood move, ease the stiffness left by labor, and protect against the cold that creeps in when the body stills. Touch itself is part of the healing. A particularly charming note in one medical papyrus advises that the best cure for sleeplessness is to anoint the feet and tell stories. You can almost hear it now, the father laughing softly, his daughter's small voice asking for another tale before she drifts away. The warmth of the oil joins with the warmth of words, and soon the chill loses its power. Among the stranger but documented treatments was the use of beer as a soothing drink before rest. Not the heavy brew of modern times, but a light, honey-sweet mixture that calmed the stomach and loosened tension. To sip it by lamplight was to end the day with peace. Some added dates for flavor, others a dash of herbs for health. The Egyptians did not separate medicine from comfort. They were one and the same. You can picture the healer of the village, an older woman carrying a basket of jars, stopping by to check on her neighbors as dusk fell. She would offer oil for sore muscles or a poultice for aching joints. Her remedies came not from temples but from experience, passed from mother to daughter. For the Egyptians, medicine was a shared act, an exchange of care within the community. A small curiosity found in medical texts is the instruction to place a warm brick wrapped in cloth near the stomach for cold within the body. This simple method would have been perfect for winter nights. The brick, heated by the fading fire used for cooking, released its warmth slowly through the night. It is one of the few traces of direct heat used for comfort, proof that the Egyptians understood thermal balance with quiet genius. According to the Ebers Papyrus, a great medical scroll over 3,000 years old, honey and milk were recommended to soften the chest and aid sleep. The idea seems almost modern, yet it connects to a larger truth. The Egyptian night was not endured, it was tended to. Each sense, smell, taste, touch was invited into the ritual of rest. The family now moves slowly towards sleep. The mother folds the linen carefully, tucking it around the child's shoulders. The father stretches his arms once, then lies down, his face lit by the last flicker of the lamp. The bowl of herbs sits beside them, still releasing its fragrance. The air feels thicker now, charged with the quiet hum of health. It is tempting to think that these small acts, the rubbing of oil, the drinking of beer, the scent of thyme, were what kept the Egyptians resilient. Their medicine did not separate body from world. The earth gave them everything they needed to rest: the warmth of clay, the sweetness of honey, the patience of oil. One touching fragment from an ancient letter survives, written by a husband to his wife. "Sleep well, my heart. I have sent you oil from the market so your skin will not feel the cold." In those words, centuries dissolve. You can feel the same tenderness you might find in any home today. Love, too, was a medicine. The lamp finally dims, leaving only the faintest glow. The air smells faintly of herbs and smoke, and the room feels wrapped in invisible warmth. You lie still, breathing with them, and sense that each of these rituals was more than habit. It was gratitude. Gratitude for surviving another day, for the earth's generosity, for the company of those who shared the night. The sound of the river is faint now, a whisper through the window. Somewhere, the healer's footsteps fade into the distance, her basket half empty, her work complete. The desert sky remains cold and brilliant, but inside this house, there is peace born of small, deliberate care. You close your eyes and feel the weight of the air settle, heavy with fragrance and silence. The oils do their quiet work, seeping into skin, softening the edges of thought. The chill outside no longer matters. The Egyptians had found the cure for it long ago. A warm touch, a kind word, and the steady faith that night, like pain, always passes. The night has quieted again, and a soft glow from the moon settles across the village roofs. You begin to notice something missing. For all the warmth of mudbrick and linen, for all the oil lamps and human closeness, there is still no flame meant for heat. The Egyptians avoided what many ancient peoples embraced: fire as comfort. Its absence feels strange until you start to see the logic behind it. Fire in the desert was both blessing and threat. It gave light and cooked food, but it also consumed quickly, leaving nothing behind but smoke and danger. In homes built from dried clay and straw, a careless spark could destroy an entire household. The risk was not theoretical. Archaeological layers from ancient settlements bear traces of blackened walls and collapsed ceilings, silent witnesses to how easily flame could turn from servant to enemy. The Egyptians were practical. They used fire sparingly, almost ceremonially. Cooking fires were placed in courtyards or on rooftops, far from sleeping rooms. The idea of a hearth glowing warmly inside the home never took root here. Their nights belonged to quieter warmth, drawn from earth and body instead of flame. Archaeological surveys of village houses reveal almost no chimneys. This absence is striking. Even when Egyptians used ovens or stoves, they positioned them under open sky. The design was deliberate, born from experience. Smoke, when trapped, blackened walls and choked breath. And breath was sacred. It carried the life force, the invisible link to the gods. To fill a room with smoke was to insult that sacred rhythm. One fascinating inscription from an administrative papyrus records repairs after a kitchen fire. The scribe notes, "The roof fell and the air turned black." The description captures both the fear and respect Egyptians felt for uncontrolled fire. It was not warmth they distrusted, but its appetite. There is still debate among historians about whether Egyptians ever used small braziers for warmth during the coldest nights. Some clay vessels with burn marks suggest that they might have held glowing coals. Yet others argue that these were used for incense rather than heating. The lack of soot on most domestic ceilings supports the latter idea. The Egyptians preferred light over heat, fragrance over flame. It is easy to imagine why. The desert provided enough contrast already: heat that could kill by day and cold that could bite by night. The people sought harmony, not extremes. Fire was too sudden, too volatile. The sun gave them enough lessons about what happened when light lost its restraint. In temples, though, fire had a different identity. Priests maintained small flames before statues of gods, feeding them oil as offerings. These sacred fires represented transformation, not comfort. They consumed the world's impurities, connecting mortals to the divine through smoke. Even here, the flame was carefully contained, never allowed to roam. It was a symbol, not a tool. A small curiosity from letters found at Amarna describes a household punished because a servant left a lamp burning unattended. The fire caught a curtain, and the family had to rebuild part of their wall. The writer notes, "They fear the night now, not for spirits, but for embers." The warning carried both superstition and memory. Instead of fire, the Egyptians turned to subtler sources of warmth. Sun-baked bricks held their heat far longer than flames ever could. Oil lamps gave light without danger. Shared bodies, layered mats, and enclosed walls created climates of safety. Warmth was cultivated rather than sparked. There is something profoundly symbolic in this restraint. In a civilization that revered the sun as a god, the night's fire remained subdued. Ra, the solar deity, was both flame and order. To light large fires after sunset might have felt like impersonation, as if mortals were daring to mimic the divine. Respect, not rebellion, shaped their nights. It is worth remembering that the Egyptians also associated darkness with fertility and renewal. The seeds of plants grew in the dark soil, and the souls of the dead renewed themselves in the dark underworld. Fire, which destroyed darkness, also risked destroying that potential. The balance between flame and shadow defined their cosmology. You can picture an Egyptian winter night along the Nile, the houses dark except for a few faint lamps glowing through narrow windows. The air smells faintly of oil and damp clay. In the distance, the stars blaze with cold precision. Inside, families whisper before sleep, their rooms filled with human heat. It is a warmth that grows slowly, a warmth earned by patience. A tablet fragment from the Old Kingdom captures this sentiment perfectly. It reads, "The wise man sleeps without fire, for his walls remember the Sunday." It is not only poetry but truth. Every mudbrick still holds the day's heat, slowly exhaling it into the night. You close your eyes and listen to the quiet. Without fire, there are no crackles, no shifting embers. The silence is complete, deep enough to hear your own pulse. Yet the air around you is still warm, still kind. The Egyptians did not fear the cold because they had mastered the art of partnership with their land. Fire was not needed. The earth itself was enough. As the stars move overhead, the house breathes softly, storing what remains of the Sunday. The lamp's glow fades, leaving only the warmth of walls, of skin, of faith. And in that darkness, you understand the lesson their civilization perfected. Peace is found not in the conquering of nature, but in learning to rest within its rhythm. The faint light of dawn spreads across the sky, but your thoughts wander beyond Egypt for a moment. The question lingers, like the morning mist rising from the Nile. How did other ancient peoples face the same chill? And how did Egypt's quiet wisdom compare to theirs? To understand that, you must travel across deserts, rivers, and mountains in your imagination, watching how different civilizations turned cold nights into lessons of ingenuity. In Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers carved fertile valleys through harsher winters, homes were often heated by small clay braziers. The walls were thicker, and fires were more common, though they brought constant risk of smoke and sickness. Archaeologists have found soot-stained ceilings in cities like Ur and Babylon, proof that warmth there often came with discomfort. People huddled around embers that dimmed before dawn, coughing softly as the fumes filled their rooms. In contrast, the Egyptians kept their air pure and their warmth gentler. Their homes breathed rather than burned. Farther north in Greece, another balance appeared. Stone houses trapped the sun during the day, but Greek builders learned to shape courtyards that caught warmth like bowls. At night, people gathered near hearths that glowed in the center of the home. Fire was the heart of the Greek household, a sacred flame kept alive for generations. To them, warmth was community, the hearth a symbol of belonging. The Egyptians shared that sentiment, though their hearths were invisible, made of earth and body rather than flame. In the colder lands beyond, where winter covered the world in frost, ancient Europeans relied on fire as necessity. Woodlands fed their flames, and smoke blackened their walls until they gleamed like polished charcoal. In these regions, warmth was battle, not harmony. Every night demanded defense. For the Egyptians, who lived between extremes, warmth became an art of balance. Their cold was never constant, only seasonal, and their wisdom lay in adapting rather than conquering. It is fascinating to note that while many cultures measured wealth in metal or cattle, Egyptians measured comfort in linen. Clean fabric, properly woven and stored, was a treasure greater than gold in its everyday use. Their economy of warmth revolved around the skill of hands, not the size of fires. A nobleman might boast of jewels, but a house filled with soft linen was a true mark of civilization. A small curiosity from early trade records mentions caravans exchanging Egyptian flax for cedar wood from Lebanon. The irony is poetic. The people who built without wood traded their fabric to those whose fires burned endlessly. Linen went north to clothe and warm others, while wood came south to build coffins and furniture. In this exchange of material and meaning, The Egyptians spread their philosophy without even trying. Scholars often describe Egypt as the land of moderation. Everything in its culture sought balance: the weight of stone against air, the glare of sunlight against shade, the heat of day against the cool of night. This harmony extended to rest. While others sought to dominate their environment, the Egyptians shaped their world so that it answered them gently. Their solutions were humble: mudbrick, reed, linen, oil, shared sleep. Yet in their simplicity, they achieved what others could not: stability, lasting millennia. If you look at Mesopotamian ruins today, you see traces of burned brick and collapsed hearths. In contrast, the walls of Egyptian homes often remain intact, still echoing with the memory of stored warmth. The earth they shaped continues to serve, a quiet testament to design perfected by patience. One fascinating observation by modern archaeologists is that Egyptian domestic architecture anticipated modern sustainability. Thick walls, small windows, natural airflow, all principles of today's eco-friendly design existed there thousands of years ago. Yet they were not born of theory, only observation. The builders simply trusted the wisdom of the sun and the soil. It is tempting to wonder whether travelers from distant lands ever marveled at Egypt's restraint. Imagine a Greek visitor standing inside a dark Egyptian house, surprised by the lack of fire, feeling warmth seep from the walls instead. Perhaps he left wondering why his people labored to keep flames alive while the Egyptians slept peacefully in their quiet rooms. One ancient record from a foreign envoy describes Egypt at night. Their homes glow with no smoke, their air is sweet, their sleep unbroken. The admiration in that line still feels fresh. It captures the essence of how this civilization's relationship with nature set it apart. When the Romans came centuries later, they brought hypercausts, systems of underground heating powered by fire. They warmed their villas with smoke and stone. Yet even then, Egyptian architecture remained distinct. Local builders continued to favor thick earth walls and narrow openings, trusting in the same methods that had always worked. Fire may have symbolized progress elsewhere, but in Egypt, wisdom meant restraint. You picture all these worlds now overlapping in twilight: the smoky hearths of Babylon, the glowing fires of Greece, the flickering torches of Rome, and beside them, the serene silence of an Egyptian house where no flame burns. Each represents a different philosophy of living with the earth. The comparison reveals something profound. Egypt's genius lay not in invention but in observation, in reading the environment until it became a companion. Their nights, cool and quiet, taught them that warmth need not roar to be real. Theirs was a civilization that listened instead of forcing, one that found peace between extremes. Outside, the first birds of morning call again, their voices lifting over the still air. The Nile glows gold under the rising Sunday. The world warms naturally, and no one needs a fire. You stand by the window slit, feeling the same soft current that ancient builders once invited through these walls. The air smells of life returning. In this light, you understand that Egypt's wisdom was not isolationist but universal. They showed the world that survival can be graceful, that comfort can exist without conquest. Their warmth was quiet, shared, and enduring, a philosophy as much as a practice. As the last chill fades from your skin, you realize that the lesson remains timeless. Every civilization wrestled with the cold, but only Egypt made peace with it. The morning has fully arrived. The light is gentle, slipping across the mud-brick walls like golden water. The family begins to stir. The child opens her eyes first, blinking at the brightness, while her parents shift slowly beside her. The air that was cool hours ago now begins to warm again, carrying the smell of river clay, bread dough, and faint oil. Another day begins, and with it comes the rhythm that has guided their lives for centuries. The Egyptians did not wake suddenly. Their mornings were gradual, respectful. The transition between sleep and work mirrored the one between night and day. They believed that rushing the dawn disturbed the body's balance, so the first moments were always soft, stretching, quiet speech, a sip of water from a clay jar. The same patience that defined their nights continued into their mornings. You can see it now, the mother rising to sweep the floor with a bundle of palm fronds, brushing away the dust that gathered overnight. The father rolls up the mat, folding it neatly against the wall. Each act is small, but it has meaning. Cleanliness was more than comfort, it was devotion. To greet the sun with an orderly home was to honor the god Ra's daily rebirth. Archaeologists have found countless small altars near household sleeping areas, carved or painted with simple prayers. Give us the dawn again, keep us warm until the light. These were not grand gestures but humble affirmations of gratitude. Every sunrise reaffirmed the world's order, proof that life continued as it should. One touching scene from a painted tomb shows a family greeting the day. The father stretches his arms toward the sun disk, the mother pours a small libation of water, and a child holds a loaf of bread. The caption reads, "They awaken with the warmth of Ra." That phrase captures the entire philosophy of Egyptian life. Warmth was not just temperature, it was blessing. In the first light, they prepared their bodies for work. Water from a ceramic jar, cooled overnight, was poured over their hands and faces. The chill was shocking but invigorating. It washed away the night's stillness and welcomed the day's vitality. Some rubbed a drop of oil onto their skin to protect it from the sun's dry kiss. The scent of that oil lingered in the air long after they stepped outside. A small curiosity found in ancient writings suggests that morning routines were also moments for reflection. The instruction of Ptahhotep, one of Egypt's oldest wisdom texts, advises, "Rise in peace, cleanse your heart as you cleanse your hands." To them, cleanliness and calm were the same discipline. The care they gave to their homes at night was mirrored in the care they gave themselves each morning. It is widely accepted that Egyptians valued rhythm over urgency. They rose with the sun and rested with it, allowing their lives to follow the same pattern as the land. Even in the bustling cities, where traders shouted and donkeys brayed, mornings began with quiet ritual. People did not run toward work. They flowed into it like the river flowing toward the sea. You imagine stepping outside with them. The air is still cool, carrying the faint dampness of the riverbank. The fields stretch wide and green, their edges gilded by light. Farmers move slowly through the mist, tools balanced on their shoulders. The sound of water splashing from irrigation channels fills the distance. Even the animals seem calmer in this hour, as though they too understand the sanctity of dawn. A curious record from a traveler's diary notes that Egyptian mornings smelled unlike any other place. The scent of baked bread mixed with river reeds and lotus, and the soft call of ibis birds marked the start of work. He wrote, "They begin their day not with noise but with fragrance." That fragrance, faint but steady, carried the promise of warmth. You look back toward the small house. Inside, the mats are folded, the lamp cleaned of soot, the bowl of herbs emptied. The cat stretches by the doorway, its tail flicking lazily as the father steps outside to greet the Sunday. The mother hums softly while kneading dough, her hands moving with practiced rhythm. The child plays with a reed doll, laughing quietly. Their life is ordinary, yet their peace feels extraordinary. Egypt's genius was this serenity. They did not separate work from rest, or cold from warmth. Each moment served the next. The heat of day prepared the comfort of night, and the cool of night renewed the strength for dawn. Theirs was a circular existence, not a line to be followed, but a song to be sung again and again. Scholars often marvel at how little their domestic habits changed over thousands of years. The same beds, lamps, and mats appear in tomb paintings across dynasties. What changed were the decorations, never the essentials. The people had already perfected the art of living simply. It is easy to imagine that, at this hour, all along the Nile, homes like this one awaken in harmony. Hundreds of families sweeping, stretching, lighting small lamps, murmuring prayers. The same sun warms every wall. The same breeze drifts through every window slit. Egypt becomes not a collection of houses but a single great organism inhaling light. You linger in that thought, feeling the slow warmth rise against your skin. The same warmth those ancient people felt still exists, carried through time by the same sun, the same air, the same river. Their rituals survive in the quiet moments of every morning when someone pauses to breathe, to stretch, to be grateful for another day. The cold has vanished now. The sun climbs higher, and the air hums softly. You realize that the secret of their sleep, their warmth, and their peace was never about materials or methods. It was about trust. Trust in the world's rhythm, in the returning light, in the cycle that never fails. As the day unfolds, their night of stillness transforms into movement, but the balance remains. The walls that once held warmth now reflect the Sunday. The same house that protected against the cold now offers shade from heat. Every surface, every breath, every motion is part of a pattern that has endured for millennia. And as you watch them disappear into the brightness, you understand the quiet perfection of their lives. They did not chase comfort. They simply lived in harmony with it. The sun now stands high above the horizon, gleaming across the surface of the Nile like a sheet of moving glass. The world is awake again, alive with the steady rhythm of work and song. Yet beneath this brightness, your thoughts drift back to the long night just past, to the way the Egyptians slept without fear of the cold, to the wisdom woven into every mat and wall. What you have witnessed is not only a way of living but a philosophy of trust in the earth itself. The family you have followed begins their day as countless others did before them. The father steps into the fields, his shadow stretching across the green stalks. The mother carries bread to bake in the clay oven near the courtyard, the warmth of morning already enough to dry the dough. The child runs toward the shade of a palm tree, chasing a butterfly that gleams white in the light. Their movements seem ordinary, yet they complete the cycle that began with last night's cold. The Egyptians were masters of rhythm. Their survival depended on listening to the river's rise and fall, to the wind's breath, to the change of air that signaled the coming of chill. They never forced the world to obey. They adjusted themselves to its pulse. This humility gave them comfort that lasted longer than any empire. Historians agree that the true secret of their endurance was not found in their monuments or armies, but in their balance. They created a civilization both strong and gentle, capable of holding warmth in silence. They saw no need to conquer the elements when they could cooperate with them. A house was a partner, not a possession. The earth was a friend, not an obstacle. One intriguing record from a philosopher of the later period captures this sentiment. The wise live as the Nile flows quiet, constant, never grasping. Those words could easily describe the rhythm of Egyptian nights. Each evening was an act of surrender, each morning an act of renewal. Even in their grand temples, the same principle held true. The walls of Karnak and Luxor were designed to channel both shadow and sunlight in careful harmony. When night fell, the coolness of the stone became a kind of rest, a place where even gods might sleep. The architecture itself embodied the same calm that guided every household. Archaeologists have long noted that Egyptian domestic life changed little across dynasties. Perhaps it did not need to. The methods they perfected, mud-brick walls, small windows, linen sheets, oil for skin, and closeness for warmth worked perfectly within their world. These were not relics of poverty, but expressions of intelligence, solutions born from deep understanding. A lesser-known inscription carved into a simple worker's tomb reads, "I built my walls thick, and my house was cool by day, warm by night." It is not the boast of a builder, but a song of gratitude. Even the poorest among them shared this quiet mastery of comfort. The gods themselves could not have asked for a more peaceful form of devotion. You think again of the desert beyond the river, stretching endless and pale. To sleep there would mean cold that bites like silence itself. Yet the Egyptians turned that same sand into the material of safety. They shaped it into bricks that remembered the day's heat, taught it to cradle them through the night, and trusted it to endure. It is as if the land repaid their respect by keeping them warm. The scholars who study their way of life still debate the fine details. Did they cover their feet with woven reed shoes at night? Did they hum prayers as they closed their eyes? Some argue, others disagree, but all recognize one truth. The Egyptians did not fear the night. Their world was a conversation between light and shadow, and they spoke its language fluently. You close your eyes and picture that world one last time. The house is quiet again, the mats rolled, the lamp empty. The smell of oil still lingers faintly in the air, mixed with dust and grain. Outside, the palm fronds shimmer in the sun, their edges whispering to the wind. The river flows past, patient as eternity. In that stillness, you realize that the Egyptians' answer to the cold was never only physical. It was emotional, spiritual, and communal. Warmth came from faith as much as from material. It came from the belief that each night had its place in the pattern of the world, and that the morning would always return. The night taught them patience, and the day rewarded them with light. This was their secret. Not defiance, but harmony. And it endures, just as their walls do, just as their stories do, whispered by the sand that once kept them safe. You take one final breath of this ancient air in your imagination. The warmth that surrounds you now feels earned, gentle, and pure. You understand that the Egyptians' greatest invention was not a pyramid or a temple, but peace with their own environment. They learned to rest without fighting the cold, to live without fearing the dark. And as you prepare to leave their world behind, that lesson remains. True warmth, they would say, is not a matter of flame, but of balance. The wind outside softens. The house fades into sunlight. The Nile sparkles like a slow heartbeat. The ancient land rests in its rhythm, unchanged and eternal. You let the image settle, slow and still, as if your own breath is part of that same peace. The story has ended, but the calm remains. The world grows quiet again. The light of Egypt dissolves, leaving only a soft hum of memory. You can still feel the coolness of the clay walls, the weight of linen against your skin, the scent of myrrh hanging faintly in the air. Everything slows now, the breath, the heartbeat, even the thoughts that once wandered through sand and starlight. You imagine lying once more on that low mat beside the sleeping family. The cat stretches, the lamp fades, the walls glow faintly from remembered sunlight. The cold outside is no longer sharp. It is simply part of the night's rhythm. Every inhalation carries the warmth of 1,000 years of human trust. The river continues to flow, though you cannot see it. Its sound becomes a lullaby, steady and distant. The same water that carried reeds and boats and prayers now carries your thoughts gently towards stillness. Each moment becomes slower than the last. The Egyptians would have said that sleep is a small returning to the underworld, a rehearsal for eternity. You feel that now not as fear, but as serenity. The body softens, the mind drifts, and time itself pauses to listen. There is no need to chase warmth. It is already here, within you, within the air, within the story that has wrapped around you like a soft blanket. So, rest now. Let the last of the desert wind pass through you. Let the quiet of the Nile fill your mind until everything feels suspended, calm, and whole. The ancients have shared their wisdom. You are safe. You are warm. You are home. Sleep well, traveler of history. Sweet dreams.